tranquil streets of London, this mass of humanity moving through the park.
1981, the first London Marathon.
On that day, only 7,000 people ran.
Fast forward to 2023, and there'll be 50,000 more.
Just like me. We're all following legends of our time.
The 1 million strong before us that have crossed the iconic line. Over £1 billion raised.
Life-changing memories made.
Early mornings.
Late nights.
Months of training.
It's just one day, but it feels like years in the making. So even when your body feels broken,
And you hit the wall.
Dig deep and remember that now, more than ever, we run together.
Fantastic prize purse. It's increased yet again here this year. So many of the athletes citing the importance of this race to their career. You know, athletes need to earn money to look after themselves, to be able to develop, to be able to train. But also they love the profile that this London Marathon event gives to wheelchair racing.
Isn't it a great start as well, Han, to see that sight, them all lining up, and then the masses will follow later on at about 10 o'clock. The wheelchairs will get us underway before the elite women. And as you say, a richer prize pot than it's ever been, which is brilliant.
It certainly is. There's also flying 400 for these athletes just over Tower Bridge. There's an extra bonus prize pot for the fastest person in that 400 metre segment in each of the men's and the women's races. So we might get a look at that. Depends how the other elite races are developing. There's the full male start list for the wheelchair races. Marcel Hug topping the list. He really is the man to beat today. A very large men's field there. A few debuts from some of the British athletes as well. Oh, 3 pages there for the elite wheelchairs. We're going to take you through our highlighted entries. This is Susanna Scaroni. She won Boston last week. Has she recovered? That was just on Monday. The American athlete here to have a go at London. This is the world record holder from Switzerland over this distance, Manuela Schär. She didn't start last year with illness. She didn't finish in Boston on Monday due to a puncture. And she'll be out for some revenge here today, I'm sure. Katalin de Brunner is the defending champion. She won last year in a championship record. She didn't have to face the likes of Manuela Schär. Madison Rosario, they DNS'd with illness. This is Daniel Romanchuk of the USA, very, very close to causing an upset last year. Went with Marcel Hug for the whole race, couldn't quite get past him. Now this man is a Paralympic British superstar. 3rd last year in a competitive sprint finish to give him his 21st podium here at the London Marathon. But this is the man to beat this morning. All the other men have got to hope that Marcel Hug is carrying a little bit of fatigue from that championship course record he powered himself to in Boston last week. Marcel Hug says he's recovered and he's slept fine this week. He could be on for that 3rd consecutive title today.
And we can see Gordon Perry there, winner of the first ever wheelchair race in 1983. Some 40 years ago, we're celebrating a lot of anniversaries this year at the TCS London Marathon. And Gordon gets our wheelchairs underway, and that is the official start of the 2023 London Marathon. It's amazing to see how the chairs have changed over that 40 years, isn't it, Hannah, and how technology has developed.
We were talking about this morning. It's a big talking point in the ambulant events, the shoe technology. But when we were looking at pictures of what Gordon Perry was racing in 40 years ago, it took him around about 3 hours to complete the marathon course. Our athletes today, the men we'd expect to come in round about 1 hour 20, the women round about 1 hour 30. So the technological developments have been astounding in the wheelchairs. They're very streamlined. They're very pricey as well. It's a big thing to be able to get yourself an elite racing wheelchair. I think, is that the women on the right-hand side? Because that'd be, I'm powering away already, but it was Susanna Scaroni of the United States said in the press conference yesterday, she still believes their seating position in the chair, that's what's key to pushing faster and achieving those faster times. But there's a lot of carbon, they're like road racing bikes, aren't they? They're carbon, they're very, very light. And there's a lot of refinement of the technology.
Yeah, you can see the chairs there, and as you say, Han, they have developed over the years. But as you quite rightly say, it is down to that seating position, which I always find amazing, how they sustain that position, that strong core and the strong arms to push themselves around that course. And I guess with technology developing, even the streamline, the hats, the helmets that they wear, everything, the finer details that go into it to make sure they're as fast as they possibly can on the course, on the day. And it's like, say, 50% faster than they used to be some 40 years ago. So lots of improvements there. I see David Weir's got that Hoob suit on, that streamlined suit. He's tucked in there in 3rd position already. And this will be quite a fast section, I think, this first 5K. We know it's downhill, so they may take advantage of that. And it looks like it's going to be a cracking race because straight away we've got some of the leading athletes right up at the front.
So it did look like Susanna Scaroni of the United States had separated herself from that women's field, but she's going to get caught up in the men's field here, perhaps trying to put herself in a good position to get towed along to a fast time. But this is Tomoki Suzuki of Japan in the lead at the moment. He won the 2020 Tokyo Marathon in a course record, so he's got the caliber to be at the front of this field. He's at the moment leading from Daniel Romanchuk. See the American athlete in 2nd there with a sky blue helmet, a bit of red on the front. David Weir with his black helmet, Union Jack flag. And we have got Marcel Hug sitting there in 5th place at the moment. And these athletes just settling into a pace here. Suzuki perhaps might maybe choosing the better line. I always think this section, this first 5K section, the roads aren't as smooth as you might like for a wheelchair athlete. There's a lot of street furniture there as well. They've got to keep their wits about them.
Yeah, I seen that in Manchester last week. I was on the side of the Manchester Marathon, and there was a few little accidents, and we've seen it in Boston with the punctures to the wheels as well. You know, the courses, they are as smooth as they can be, but these are just the normal roads, the normal streets of London that they're pushing round. So, you know, they've got to be aware of that. And we were talking last night about people carrying puncture repair kits and whether they do that. And we saw it in the major last week in Boston. We may see it again today.
As with all our athletes this morning, they will start in the Blackheath and Greenwich Park, head into this fast 5 kilometres. This is east away from central London. They'll then turn back on themselves and make their way towards Cutty Sark. That landmark will hit them at around about 10 kilometres. Then continue on their way towards central London, heading towards the iconic Tower Bridge. They'll cross over to the other side of the River Thames. Then make their way towards the Isle of Dogs, through Canary Wharf and the financial district. They'll take in Rainbow Row at Limehouse before they get towards the business end of racing. They'll head along the embankment and see Big Ben looming in front of them. They turn onto Birdcage Walk, swing round St James's Park in front of Buckingham Palace, and then into the final stretch along the Mall, where they will complete their 26.2 course.
Seems such a long way away, doesn't it, from now? But they are settling early into this 5K. As you mentioned, Hannah, it is a quick 5K section. They go downhill and then they'll make their way back towards Central for the first time. So they're actually going away towards Woolwich Arsenal as we speak, one of the secret cities of London from the wartime. And it will just settle into an early pace and they will start to take position. And we were speaking about the drafting in wheelchair racing. Is it similar to cycling? Do we see that? We've certainly seen it last year and it was a little bit controversial. I remember Tanni Gray-Thompson speaking about that, whether it's kind of ethical to sit in behind your competitors, but wonder what tactics they employ today.
It was definitely a tactic from Daniel Romanchuk last year. It was try and hang on to Marcel Hug for as long as he can. This is a much larger group than I was perhaps expecting here in the men's elite wheelchair race. Could it be that Marcel Hug was perhaps bluffing, that maybe he is tired after that course record performance in Boston on Monday? He's sitting there in 4th at the moment, but I think when we think about drafting here in the wheelchair race, for me, Lewis, yes, they're not going as fast as people are in road racing on bikes, but they are going quick, and you just got to look at the body position. You know, a wheelchair with someone in it is wider than a race bike, and there's got to be a drafting capacity there.
Yeah, and as we see it with the women, they seem to be a little bit more spread out. You know, they've got to negotiate those speed bumps as well, something to negotiate. And when you mentioned about Boston last weekend, that's interesting, Hannah, because Boston is a tough course. It's a point-to-point course, but there's lots of hills. So those climbs, those downhills, I'm just interested to see how much that's taken out the athletes who are trying to do back-to-back races, not just in the space of a week. We're talking 6 days, and that doesn't include the travel. You know, they're traveling back from the States to the United Kingdom, and I always find that fascinating how our wheelchair athletes are able to recover and do many, many more events than say our elite women and men who are going to start in a little while.
So here's our first look at the start list for the women's race. They'll be underway in around about 3 minutes. Yalam Zafi-Yahalu at the top of the list. We've got 6 sub-218 runners in this field. If things have been to be believed, this could be the best ever endurance women's race compiled. That's what Hugh Brasher, the event director, has been saying this week, and you can't necessarily argue with him. World record holder versus the Olympic champion versus defending champion, and that's before we get onto the likes of track specialist Sifan Hassan. We mentioned it a bit earlier on in the programme. Some British depth in these elite fields as well. It is the British Marathon Championships today, and they will select their team for the World Championships tomorrow, I believe. There are opportunity to gain qualifying times for those major championships and impress selectors for all of these athletes from whatever nation they're from. sure many of them will have their sights set on the World Championships that will come up in Budapest in August, and of course the Olympic Games in Paris next summer.
You can see those great shots of Greenwich Park. You can see all the masses starting to line up, and as I always say, the largest queue outside of the queue for the start line is always the one for the Portaloos in Greenwich Park.
Again, the elites very well looked after. They don't have to worry about that. Kenzebi Dibaba is on the right-hand side of this start line. Really impressive debut, 2:18.05 in the Amsterdam Marathon in the autumn, but she is the 1,500-meter world record holder. Some serious range from some of these athletes in this field. This is Safan Hassan, double Olympic champion over 5,000 and 10,000 in 2021. She said she's using today as the first step in exploring the marathon. Almaz Ayana was the fastest debutant in the marathon with her 2:17.20 in Amsterdam until that was bettered by Letissenbet Guide in Valencia. Olympic champion Perez Chipchirchir is next to her, number 10 all-time in the marathon lists, 2:17.16. She took that gold medal at the Olympic Games ahead of her teammate Bridget Kosgei. It's the first time Bridget Kosgei and Perez Chipchirchir have faced each other since Sapporo in 2021. Last year, Yalemzef Yahalu became the youngest ever winner of the London Marathon. She was the first Ethiopian to win in 7 years. She said her preparations have gone very, very well.
And we said it was an anniversary for our starters, and you can see the women's starters are now in place, ready to start our elite women. That's Ingrid Christiansen, multiple London Marathon winner. A 1985 London Marathon of 2:21.06 was the record marathon at the time, and it stood for 13 years. And Katrina McKeenan, the Irish athlete who still holds the Irish record, get our elite women underway in the TCS London Marathon. This is a stacked field. It's one of the hottest fields we've ever seen for a women's marathon on the roads, and we are in for an absolute treat, Hannah.
We are. You can see the athletes split across the road there in two groups. There's a lot of talk about the women's only world record here this morning in London. It's held at the moment by Mary Katani, set that 6 years ago here on the streets of London, 2:17.01. There's been women getting very close to it in the last few years. And the likes of Yalemzef Yahalu definitely think that that is possible today. We've got a great set of pacemakers that we'll pick out as the race progresses, but they're aiming for a first half of 68 minutes and 15. We know that the first half of this course can be a tiny bit slower than the second half. We talked about that shoe technology. That's changed the dynamic of women's marathon, well, everyone's marathoning, that they don't slow down as much in that second half as they used to. So we'll very much be keeping an eye on those splits. And if we could see a women's only world record here today, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and the London Marathon do a great job and make our lives a lot easier, don't we? The pacemaking bibs, those strips are really easy to identify. So if you're watching the same pictures that we're seeing, you'll notice our pacemakers are in the pink and yellow Nike vests, and they've got the pace across the front. There's approximately 3 pacers per group, and we have been told, and with the weather being as good as it is, it certainly looks good from the screens that we're seeing. It's a little bit better than was forecast. We're expecting a pace of around 2:16 to 2:16.30, so that will take them through halfway in around about 68 minutes, and the pacemakers are all set up. And you'll notice as well, it's an all-female lineup, it's an all-female pacemaking lineup, and that's because, as Hannah said, they are attempting a world record for a female-only race.
Still one big group at the moment. The differences between the different pacing groups at this stage in the race, the pacers have to be very, very disciplined to get this correctly and separate themselves into those correct little groups. Now, Lewis, you work with a lot of athletes in helping them prepare for the marathon. You've actually got your wife running. She won't be starting yet. She'll be with the mass start at 10 o'clock. But how important is it to get your pacing totally spot on at this early stage in the race?
It's really important, and it's actually really tricky, particularly in London, because the areas are built up and you can sometimes lose signal on the watch as they go. And, we can see Steph Twell sat in there. I think that might be Alice Wright tucked in just behind her in the white cap in the Hocker strip. and they'll be looking at their watches, but it's not always accurate. You know, technology's great these days. We have Garmin's and all different sorts of watch technology that we can go to, and I think we see someone
Lewis,
struggling a little bit.
I think that's Bridget Kosgei already struggling. That is heartbreaking. Bridget Kosgei said she'd hurt her hamstring a little bit in preparations, but she was willing to step on the line today. But you just see the hobbling there from Bridget Kosgei. Perhaps it got a little bit cold in the warm-up, that hamstring, and it certainly does not look comfortable here for the world record holder, Bridget Kosgei. And that's, oh, I'm gutted, Lewis. I think
it's absolutely devastating. Yeah, it's really devastating. It surprises me that she's on the start line if it goes that early. But as you say, Hannah, it's cold out there. Maybe she did try it and warm up and it felt okay. But that is potentially the race favourite out, and that opens it up slightly. I mean, if you're a bookmaker, you couldn't have put money on anyone. I was thinking this morning when we looked at that lineup, how would the odds reflect what we see? And that is probably the pre-race favourite, stood on the side streets of London, and it doesn't look good. But we were aware of that. You mentioned it this morning in breakfast to me, Hannah, about her carrying a hamstring niggle, but that is a real shame. She's giving a smile on the wave though, so maybe she did know a little bit under the surface that things weren't right.
I think you know what, well, especially when you're the world record holder like Bridget Kosgei, you know what it takes to do the marathon, and we always say half the battle for competing over this distance is making the start line. We of course have withdrawals in the late stages. From a British perspective, Eilish McColgan withdrew just in the final few days. It was a big hit for the event organisers and for Britain. Everyone was very excited about her debut, but Bridget Kosgei sort of barely making it through the first 2 minutes here in the London Marathon. And I wonder whether the rest of the field are even aware.
And as we were mentioning about, you know, the watches and the technology advancements that we've had over the years, it is still the biggest challenge for me is getting to the start line of a marathon injury-free. The masses face that, the elite certainly face that, and particularly at the elite level when you are pushing boundaries. You know, Bridget is probably looking at world records again. She has the current women's world record, and she's maybe thinking, I want that women's only world record. And sometimes that can just push things a little bit too far in training, which then compromises you being on the start line of the marathon. So back to the watch technology then, Hannah, because as I was saying, in London, it is really tricky. The GPS that you usually get on your training runs is maybe a little bit out. So what I tend to recommend with the athletes who are coached and some of those who are running today is that they actually check their watch as they go through the mile markers. So rather than let that auto lap be on and it click away, because that could be incorrect, actually look at it as you're going through the mile markers and just double check that you are on pace.
A look back at the elite men's wheelchair race, and it is perhaps back to business as usual. Marcel Hug getting himself into the lead here. Looks like Jets Platz in the red jersey just behind him. He picked up, I think he was maybe about the top 5 last year or so. Took a slightly rogue racing line through Birdcage Walk. Jed Platz, I'm sure he would have learned from that, and he'll rectify that as we move into the closing stages. But at the moment, we've got a lead group of 6. Marcel Hug is having a look around him, seeing what's going on. You can see the blue line on the road here. That's the shortest route for the marathon. We will see our ambulant athletes stick to that like glue. But the wheelchair athletes, they sometimes have to take a bit of a wider curve around the corners. They have got the wheels, you can see they're angled well to give a stable base for the wheelchair, but they still need to be really careful as they approach the corners, particularly if they're going at speed.
I think you've called it right, Hannah. I think we're going to see a little bit of slow races in the wheelchair races today. People may be carrying a little bit of fatigue. As we say that, though, the women's race seems to be full steam ahead, and actually they're catching some of the men and maybe taking a little bit of draft in there as well. So the females are clearly going after it. The men seems to be a little bit of a tactical affair. We can see Scaroni at the front of that race, pushing the pace hard, and people tagging in behind her. You can see Shaz sat in 3rd place there in the women's race, but there are 4 clear, and just avoiding those potholes on the road. You can see they have to navigate around and then straight back onto that blue line, which is interesting, isn't it? They kind of want to stick to that racing line, but if they see something in the road that's maybe going to cause them a little bit of trouble, then they will avoid those and try and get the best possible line on the road as opposed to the racing line itself.
So just coming up on 18 minutes here in the men's wheelchair race. They won't be too far off the 10-kilometre mark, so they have taken that hairpin bend and they're heading back towards London. We thought there could be a bit of a headwind in this section when we were looking at the weather yesterday, but we saw some pictures of the flags on the finishing straight and at the start, and it does look very, very still here in London, so perhaps it's not as bad to be at the front pushing, and Marcel Hug is very comfortable taking a leading role in these men's wheelchair races across the world. It was interesting to hear David Weir say in the press conference yesterday that he just couldn't see past Marcel Hug for the win. There is the element in these wheelchair races of those technical difficulties, but I do think, as we said on the start line, the rest of these men have got to hope that Marcel Hug has not recovered from Boston. But they're having a go, and this is what I really like. We've got Suzuki still in there, Romanchuk at the back, so it does look like David Weir of Great Britain has dropped off this group of four ever so slightly, perhaps sensing there's a real push on here for Marcel Hug. And I think we saw this last year with Daniel Romanchuk. He just kind of went, I've just got to go with him, and see what happens. But that is much easier said than done, as Marcel Hug is one of the best men's wheelchair racers of all time.
So back with the elite women at the front, you can see paces 1, 2, 3 and 4 sat there. De Barber tucked in behind. What I find fascinating about the women's race this year, Hannah, is we've got a lot of track specialists who have really stepped up. We've got Sifan Hassan, who's clearly tucked in at the back there, and we see her do that on the track, exactly the same thing. She kind of keeps her cards close to her chest early on, sits at the back, tucks in, and that, from what we've heard, is going to be her strategy. It is a case of getting on that lead group, sitting comfortably, and then seeing how long she can hold on for. But this is unknown territory for a lot of our track runners who then convert to the marathon. As we said, De Barber's tucked in there. But one thing that they may take a little bit of confidence from was Monday in Boston, because we saw for the first time a track specialist stepping up to take that women's title. And that will have given them a big, big confidence boost when Helena Beery crossed that line in Boston on Monday. And maybe they can take a little bit of an incentive for that and bring it forward into this Sunday's race.
It's Marcel Hug making his way around Cutty Sark. As always, nice big crowds here. Lewis was letting me know there's then a bridge under, a tunnel under the river they can skirt across to the Isle of Dogs and pick up the races there. 19:13 through the first 10 kilometres for Marcel Hug. That is right on his course record pace from 2021. And that day he hit 19:18, so 5 seconds faster already. Does look like, was it Jed Platts there, trying to get back onto the coattails of Marcel Hug. Suzuki and Romanchuk at the moment having to settle for third and fourth, and I don't think they would be letting that gap open up unless they absolutely had to be.
One thing I couldn't help but notice there, Hannah, you can't really notice it as we watch the elite women, but the brollies were up in Cutty Sark. That's another, 5K away here, maybe 6K away from where the women are currently on the course. That's about the 6 to 7 mile section where we've seen the elite wheelchairs. But the brollies were going up in the crowd, which means we are getting a little bit of rain. But I don't think the elites will mind. I don't think the masses will mind that. As long as it doesn't pour too much, it might be a nice little bit of drizzle, Sometimes you see those showers on the side of marathon courses to keep people cool. So they might enjoy the cooler conditions. We can see the arm sleeves are on to keep them warm in the early stages. But as we saw in Boston on Monday, a lot of people ripping those arm sleeves off later in the race. So I don't think they'll mind those cooler conditions. However, with the wheelchairs, you could see around that corner, they had to be very, very careful. And with this new shoe tech, I know we talk about it a lot, they aren't as stable around corners, and that will play a part, particularly at the finish. If we're thinking ahead to those last few corners around Birdcage Walk and onto the Mall, how will the shoes, how will your cornering be? Who will take the racing line? Who will take a bit of a wider line?
No, you are right, Lewis. These women, they're still just making their way through the first couple of miles on this first 5K segment. We were looking into sort of the historical results of this race, and Eliud Kipchoge holds the men's record, course record here in London. We're sort of saying if it seemed to look from his results, if he could keep a lid on it ever so slightly in this first 5K, it's very tempting. Of course, you've got all that adrenaline off the start line, and then you're treated to a kind first 5K. You can get it wrong. So it seemed to be if people can hold themselves back a tiny bit in this first section, then it will come good later when we get into that section on the embankment when you're really struggling with that fatigue. But there's a lovely big group here. And I think all of these athletes here we can see on our screen have made a very good, brave choice. They've tucked themselves into this lead pack. They've got, in fact, 4 pacemakers there across the track. I do think pacemaker 5 was due to be back in another group, but perhaps they've upgraded the athlete there. I think it's Aminat Ahmed of Ethiopia, upgraded her to this group to help.
And as we mentioned, the brollies are up as we go back to the women's wheelchair, and you'll notice just how slowly they take those corners around the Cutty Sark. They're being very, very careful. You can see the crowds are building, and they do start to build throughout the morning. But our women's wheelchair race have passed the 6 mile point, which is around about 10K, and they'll start making their way towards Tower Bridge. We'll just have a look at who we've got there. Is that Rainbow Cooper? That's one of the Weir Archery Academy wheelchair athletes, and a big inspiration, and somebody who Dave Weir's paid particular attention to. But we go back to the leaders, and that is Scaroni at the front of the way. So Susanna Scaroni leading the way. I want to say it's a little bit of gap, but it feels like they're just playing close attention, Hannah. That gap isn't opening too much. I think Hugh was pushing in the men's race, but I think Scaroni's gap is more of a competitive one, I would say.
You can see Madison de Rosario of Australia has got herself into 2nd position there. She was another DNS along with Manuela Shah last year round, both of those picking up a last-minute illness. But de Rosario hasn't actually been able to make the start line here in London for 3 years because of various disruptions. So I'm sure the Australian is delighted to be here today. She took a handy 2nd place behind Susanna Scaroni at Boston. But didn't really tell the whole story of Boston. Scaroni did win by 5 minutes, but Manuela Shah had a puncture. And some of the race reports would say that Manuela Shah was gaining on Scaroni when she had to stop with that puncture. Last year's champion, Katalin de Brunner, just easing herself into 2nd place then. There, she won Berlin in 2022 in the autumn on her debut, and then a week later came here and broke the course record. So she's fairly new to this marathon distance. Katalin de Brunner is hoping to get herself up amongst it again today.
You can see they're taking advantage of that downhill section off the first bridge that they go over. We caught a shot of Eden Rainbow Cooper before from Great Britain, and obviously she had a brilliant 2022, clearing marathon silver at the Commonwealth Games and winning the Great North Run. She finished 3rd on her London debut, but this looks like a competitive race at the front. We said all the races were stat this year. That includes the women's wheelchair, the men's wheelchair, and the men's elite and women's elite.
So we're not entirely surprised to see Marcel Hug with some clear ground behind him. He has been on the charge. I think he kind of eased his way through that first 10 kilometres. Like you said, Lewis, it did look a little bit slippy around Cutty Sark, so perhaps playing it safe in that section. But now Marcel Hug is all out there on his own. Look at that. It's a huge gap behind him. That has opened up just in the last 3 or 4 minutes. He's making his way towards Surrey Quays, towards central London, and he could have this all his own way.
I just wonder with Hug, you know, was it just a case of, I'm just going to see how things are after Boston and just sat in for a little bit, and now he's actually, the body's feeling good, I'm off. And he's just gone to the front round Cutty Sark, and then away he goes.
It's precisely that, Lewis. The rest of the men must have thought, all right, we can do this, we can go with him. And then suddenly the power of the Swiss man has pulled himself away, and that is a massive gap behind him. We'll keep an eye on those splits because he was underneath his course record at 10 kilometres, 19:13 through that mark. It was 29:55 through 15 kilometres in 2021. Oh, Marcel Hug. Just with the crowds and the spectators for company, we have got umbrellas and hoods up here as we move closer to central London, and that does give slippy conditions under the wheels for these athletes. I do think it can hurt the grip as well. You've got to be prepared for this. Manuela Shah said that not only did she have a puncture in Boston last week, she actually wasn't expecting wet conditions. She didn't have the gloves and the grip that she would want for these conditions. So let's hope that our athletes were ready for these wet conditions today. Marcel Hug, you can see there he's got gloves and the grips on his hands.
the Silver Bullet as well, the helmet to reflect that nickname that he has adopted over the years. And he is one of the greatest, isn't he? I know we have a bit of a bias here in the UK towards David Weir, and we love him to pieces, and he's still going strong. But Marcel Hug has really become the star of the show in men's elite wheelchair racing as he takes another corner. What's really interesting is it did look really wet in Cutty Sark, and then now it doesn't seem so bad, as you were saying, Hannah. That I think, you know, every athlete out there on the course today will have prepared for the wet conditions. Of course they will. But at the minute, it looks pretty dry to me, and it looks pretty good.
Back with the women's elite field, just making their way through about mile 4. They might be coming up on there. You can see they're just sharing their drinks. There's drink stations for the elite athletes every 5 kilometers. They'll have personalized drinks mixed absolutely to their preferences. And they'll work with nutritionists and physiologists, figuring out the best mix of carbohydrates and electrolytes. You will see the athletes sharing as well, especially the pacemakers here. It's just, if you want to have a drink, that's a very good thing. Seeing one of the pacemakers there just asking for a bit more space. We see so many more falls in these road races than you might expect, but there's a lot of fatigue. And every athlete just trying to conserve as much energy as possible. When you chuck in drink stations, it can get a little bit hairy.
Yeah, we famously saw Mo Farah, you know, struggling with his bottles one year in London. But it's not as easy as people think. You know, you think of the speed that people are running at, and when they approach those stations, and then they've got to pick their own bottle out as well. They do mark them up. You can see on some of the bottles that the elite women have, they'll have tape around them. I know some people put straws on them and all sorts of different things, a little bit of graffiti on there so you can identify it. But when you're running towards those tables at pace, it's really hard not just to pick them up, it's then hard to drink from the bottle as well. So you can see that people are a little bit patient these days. They do understand that people need a little bit of time, a little bit of space, and then people are going to throw that bottle as well, and you've got to be careful of that, not to step on things, particularly as you get into the latter stage of the races, where obviously people will follow the elite women round and there will be bottles on the course, but the volunteers and the marshals on course do a fantastic job at keeping those streets clear. One thing that always fascinates me, Hannah, with the certainly having trained in Kenya with you, I know you weren't the biggest fan of training out there. You got the job done, but you've just been to South Africa recently. But the Kenyans actually hate training in the rain, but they seem very, very good at racing in it.
They do seem, yeah, they really, really do not enjoy training in the rain. And I think, we'd sort of be baffled. You know, you'd see them do all this training and suddenly it rains. And they kind of go, no, I shan't do anything today. But these international athletes, they'll be very, very used to tackling all the conditions. And I think when you commit to running a road race in Britain, you know what it's going to be like. We know what the weather's like in Britain. So we've got a 5:12 split there through 4 miles. The women's only world record target of 2:17.01 is definitely on very early stages here in the race. The 2:16 pace is 5:12 miling. So they're really operating around about that. It was 16:13 through the first 5 kilometers for these women. So that wasn't lightning quick. But we do think it might be not necessarily a bad thing if they were conservative at that stage.
Yeah, just outside 2:17 pace for the first 5K. As we mentioned, it is slightly downhill, but I think people get a little bit carried away with that as well. You know, over the first half, it isn't the quickest half of the course if you can get it right. We know Paula's world record round here was a negative split. We've seen Ayana do an unbelievable negative split in her last marathon, so it'll be interesting to see how she goes. And the general consensus in the women's race was that they were going to go off a little bit more conservative, which is why the pacemakers have been pulled together, and they were going to stick to one group as opposed to two. There was conversations about potentially having 2 groups, but there is one group at the front, and they're going to go off that little bit more conservative, which means we may see a fast second half, and I believe that may play into the hands of those track specialists who can finish strong. So it'll be interesting to see if somebody thinks, you know what, I'm going to make a move early. But right now what we're seeing is, it's never a slow pace, is it? That'd be doing it a disservice. But it's a very settled pace. And I think that's good for a fast time. So despite, you know, a quick check of the watch there, but despite being maybe 30, 40 seconds away from scheduled pace, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
And it's interesting to see Kinsebe Dibaba so high up. Sifan Hassan, you said it, Lewis. She's always content to sit at the back of track races and come through very strongly. The Dutch athlete is really settled in at the back of this group. She does seem very content to relax and sit back there. And if I was racing that, I'd be much more comfortable on the edge of a group. You've got the likes of Dibaba and Chepchirchir right in the middle of this group, and you're going to be getting clipped. You're going to be kind of jostled from either side. You've got Career there as well in the middle in the orange vest. She was a brilliant 4th place last year after spending much of the preparation thinking she was going to be a pacemaker. But I think she always knew she was going to race this year. But Dibaba, with the white arm sleeves and the gloves on, really up on the back of those pacemakers there. Great debut at 2:18, but she didn't actually get the family record. Her sisters actually run 2:17.56. Chiranesh Dibaba picked up a 2nd place in 2017, I think, behind that women's only world record performance took place there for Mary Keitany.
I bet that's competitive around games, isn't it? You've ran that quick for the marathon and you aren't the fastest in the family. Wow, and I was just picking up on the strips there. You'll see the NN Nike running strips as 3 in that lead pack. So we got Dibaba in there, Yahalu, last year's winner, and Diana, of course, who Hannah was just mentioning. And I guess, is it a team sport? People who watch from the outset, they think it's an individual sport, but these ladies are training as a team now and training regularly together, and they'll push each other on. They come together as a team on race day, and it is very much you run for yourself, but there may be some team tactics in there to help each other out. Certainly, as you mentioned, Hannah, sharing drinks bottles at certain stages as well. You tend to see the pacemakers do that more, but it will be interesting to see if they do work together in the latter stages of today's race.
So this is the next group, slightly further down the road. This is Susanna Sullivan and Sofia Yaramchuk of Italy. They were due to have a pacemaker. We're due to have Jess Warner-Judd. We've already seen Aminette Ahmed further up the track. So I think we still have got Nelly Chipchumba and perhaps Jessica Judd in there helping this chase group. They're going to be aiming for more around the 2:23, 2:24 mark. Sofia Yaramchuk could possibly be targeting the Italian national record. Valeria Stranio has that for 2 hours 23:44 back in 2012. So the Italian got good company there with Susanna Sullivan, and hopefully the Italian and the American can work together as they move around the streets.
Yeah, they look really good tucked in there, don't they? Just behind that pacemaker. So they've got the one pacemaker there, which is helpful as well. It's not just that they're on their own. They've got that pacemaker. We can see the chase group are around 35 seconds back at this stage. It's not a huge gap. It's not massive. We're 25 minutes into the race. So that's about right. And we will see the British women behind that. I believe Samantha Harrison is then behind that chase group, and she has her own pacemaker. Callie Thackeray, who she does a bit of training with, will be on course helping her. We see the GoPros and the iPhones out on the side and the electric bikes. I always think that's cheating, Hannah, do you, when you're on an electric bike at the side? But it shows how fast the women are going at the front when you're pedaling away on an electric bike, and they're making it look so smooth out there. At 5:17 miles, so a little bit slower again than that 5:12. So they have settled into around about 2:17, 2:17.30 pace early on. But like we keep saying, we don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We think it's going to be a little bit of a burn up there, but it doesn't mean as well that they're a minute behind schedule. It's easy to look at it and think they're a minute behind schedule. They're not. Right now, they're only 15, 20 seconds behind schedule. That would accumulate over the race, of course, if they kept at this pace. But if they go through halfway, they might only be sort of 20, 30 seconds behind schedule. And that is easy made up with a fast finish. So it'll be intriguing to see how fast this goes, especially with so many people in that lead group.
And I do wonder, the pacemakers are all checking their watches. They're all running together. I think if they were really way off, they would have had a discussion with the likes of Spencer Barden. He coordinates the elite fields here in London and is in constant communication with the athletes and the coaches and the agents. And I think if this was outside of the scope of what they was asked for, we'd see one of these pacemakers trying to change it, but they seem very settled, and the athletes do behind as well. It's very, very important to conserve energy as much as you can at this stage in the marathon, mentally and physically. And I do think that's what we can see going on.
Yeah, we can see the flags out, the balloons are out, certainly ready for the masses, but the spectators are out early even in the rain. The Brits love a little bit of rain, don't they? The famous saying, skin is waterproof. They won't mind it.
So back to the elite men's wheelchair race. Business as usual. Marcel Hug powering away. We haven't had any splits for him for a while. Let's hope he's roundabout on that course record pace. That's about all he's got to aim for. Brilliant course record in Boston on Monday. He said he surprised himself. It was the fastest ever marathon time for a wheelchair athlete, but it won't count as a world record, that course in Boston. Too much downhill, I think, for that to count as a world record, but it was still a marker that Marcel Hug sent out to his rivals, and they certainly heard it. They were very intimidated. And they were talking about that in the press conference, that Marcel Hug is pushing down the road. He's got a 15k split of 29.07. That's significantly under his course record pace. Wow. Could we see 2 course records in 5 or 6 days for Marcel Hug? That would be very impressive. These athletes competing in so many of the world marathon majors. We've spoken about the ability to recover between events for our wheelchair athletes. They are out there for a shorter period of time than the ambulant athletes. He's on Tower Bridge already, Marcel Hug, and the crowds are building. So many banners out supporting all the charities. They'll be waiting for those mass participation runners that will get their journey underway soon. This will be the first of the elite athletes they'll get a look at. And they've been waiting to see the first athlete they get. Marcel Hug, and he'll take that lovely little downhill here off Tower Bridge. And we'll head towards that flying 400 section that's out there for our wheelchair athletes. Some extra prize money up for grabs. I wonder if Marcel Hug, he said he's not the fastest sprinter. He might not bother lifting his pace. He knows he's on course record pace here. He might just keep his powder dry and focus on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting tactic, isn't it? I think we said they sat in, we're seeing it a slight different race. Is that the chase group, is it? I don't know, it's the lead women actually. So we've gone over to the lead women, and it is a completely different race in the elite wheelchair women's race. Marcel Hug out on his own in the men's, but it's very much a race between 4 ladies on the road. They're 40 minutes in now. Susanna Scaroni still in there. Manuela Shah, is that Manuela Shah at the front? Hannah, is she now leading?
Yeah, I think the white, no, not by what we were told before. No, we've got Susanna Scaroni in the lead, Catalina Brunner in second. Madison de Rosario is the 4th athlete in that group. And I think I had identified that as Manuela Shah with the white helmet on earlier, but that's not what we were given. Very helpfully, we're given the outfits that the athletes anticipate competing in, and it really helps us pick them out. So I have to try and confirm that 3rd place athlete, perhaps from a different camera shot. But you're right, Lewis, totally different dynamic than the men's race. 4 women pushing their way around the streets of London, around about the 20-kilometre mark now. And they'll be making their way towards Tower Bridge shortly. We've already seen Marcel Hug move past that landmark, but that's really exciting to see a group of 4 like that. If they can stay together, that would be great. We are nearly ready for the elite men's start. See the championship start gathering behind there. That's the very best club runners in Britain. They have to run a good qualifying time to get themselves in there over the half or the full marathon. So that's a really elite group there behind a phenomenally elite group. That group at the front, right by the start line, includes 4 of the 5 fastest ever marathoners. And that's before you count the reigning champion and lots of other people down there that are very quick. There they are. Amos Kiprutu, top of the pile, took the title 6 months ago. A very short gap between the last London Marathon and this one. Kenenisa Bekele and Kelvin Kiptum, the 2nd and 3rd fastest of all time. This is the first time we've ever had 2 athletes with 2:01 personal bests in the same race. As we've mentioned before, we've got the British Championships going on. Debbie Griffiths, Chris Thompson, Ben Connor, and Sir Mo Farah on the first list as well. Great British Olympian has said this will be his last marathon, doing it here on the streets of London, but he's got a real battle on to be first Brit. That man down there with 33 next to his name, Emile Caresse, is on his debut. Broke the European 10-mile record back in March, and everyone is very, very excited about him. And I think it could be quite the ding-dong on the domestic scene between Mo Farah and Emile Caresse.
And a man who needs no introduction. He is the greatest of all time when it comes to the marathon, arguably the greatest men's distance runner of all time. The only man to ever break 2 hours for the marathon, the current men's world record holder. He had an off day on Monday, it'd be fair to say. It shows it happens to the best, but we are absolutely delighted to have him here in London to be the official starter of our men's race this morning.
There is Emile Caresse, based up in Leeds here in the UK. On his debut, picked up a European cross-country silver medal behind Jakob Ingebrigtsen in December. He's in good form. Kelvin Kiptum won Valencia out of nowhere. It's a bit of a surprise package. Great half marathon runner, but to debut in the third fastest time ever, very impressive from the Kenyan. This is Kenenisa Bekele of Ethiopia. He's a phenomenal track and cross-country athlete. And people have been underwhelmed by his marathon career, which is mind-boggling when he's the second fastest of all time. This is Tamar Tola of Ethiopia. He took the win at the World Championships in Oregon, and then personal best in Valencia, finishing fourth in that race. Last year's winner, Amos Kiprutu, is up next. His teammate, Evans Chebet, successfully defended his Boston title on Monday. Can Amos Kiprutu keep it going for the two running club from Kenya? This is Sir Mo Farah taking wonderful applause from the crowd. Pretty handy personal best, that 2:05.11. If he's got any of that muscle memory, if you like, left in his legs, could we see a last good performance here from Sir Mo Farah? Typical of the London Marathon organisers, 4 of the 5 fastest marathon runners ever, and then they've gone and got the fastest one ever to start the race.
And we are underway in the men's and the masses elite race at the TCS 2023 London Marathon. You can see the bouncy style of Andy Butchart getting up the start line there. It shows how fast they have to go, Hannah, to get off that start line. You'll see all the club vests in the background as well as those elite vests, but it is one of the best sights in world running, the London Marathon mass start. That is your elite runners and the championship start in the shot currently, and then your masses will follow. And you can see there's always a race to try and beat the pacemakers. There's always one who wants that couple of minutes of fame at the front. It's quite impressive that they actually managed to get there, isn't it, given the pace they go off at?
Well, we talk about trying to control the start of your race, trying to make sure you don't, tip yourself into the red zone too early. And you're right, Lewis, there is always a club runner that fancies a go. Luckily, it does look like that exuberant starter has been swallowed up into the group already. Could that be some of the lead vehicles that haven't quite got themselves off there? That could cause a bit of chaos there. They might have to just sit and wait and let this championship start get underway. We do look like we've got one car managed to get it started, but we'll have our lead bikes down there. They're going to have the cameras on, and there we go. Always nervous moments at the start of these major road running events. And I'm delighted to say it looks like we've got all of those pacemakers, all the key athletes away safely. See Mo Farah there at the back of the group, who's Volt arm sleeves. Again, you've got to very patiently separate yourself from this group. Andrew Butchart put a nice message out on social media today saying we're really excited to help his friend and his training partner, Mo Farah, here on his last marathon in London. I was also really interested to see Australian Brett Robinson down to be in that same group with Mo Farah. They have got a tiny, kind of very elite group. Just the two of them have committed to running with Andrew Butchart and Shadrat Kimiming. They will be aiming for 2:05.30 pace. But they've got to just settle down at this stage and let the lead runners ease away ever so slightly. But the pace isn't that different. If anybody overcommits in this first group, I think they could be vulnerable for many of the chasing athletes.
Yeah, it's deceiving, isn't it? You know, the gaps, they're not the largest to start off with because the pace differential isn't too much, and then that can almost then get you into a false sense of security and think, oh, actually, I quite fancy getting on the back of this group. And then before you know it, you're in a group that's a little bit too quick, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because we know Brett Robinson is thinking of going with Mo Farah, and they've got a pacemaker for that group. But you will notice that Emile Caresse hasn't gone with that. So from a British perspective, and we have got a British Championship today, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then you've got the likes of Ben Connor. And we were talking, Hannah, about, is there a Josh Griffiths story out there from a British perspective? We've not seen that for a long time, where somebody comes from way back. Josh was in the masses that day and came through to take the British title. But at the front end, we can see Kip Ruto is already tucked in, and Kiptum is there as well, I believe. Yes, he is in the blue. He's just tucked in behind. So Kip Ruto, right behind Amos Kipruto, stablemate of the recent Boston winner. And Kiptum is also tucked in there, but he's actually just, Kiptum weirdly has just gone to the side of the road, just jogged all the way to the back of that lead group. And has he tucked back in? Yes, he's tucked back in. That was a bit of a strange move. He said he's a strange character. I know, as in, like, he's a flamboyant character. He likes to wave and all sorts of things. But that was a strange move early on. He maybe just thought, actually, this is a little bit too quick. I'm going to tuck myself back in.
No, definitely. That was what was it? We did see it was a American athlete. I think it was Chicago. His name escapes me. When he got totally caught between groups, he literally stopped, jogged very slowly back down the road to pick up the correct, because you don't want to run on your own, but you don't want to overcook it. But Kelvin Kiptum is settling back further down the group.
And talk about lead groups. We are all pretty much still together. We can actually see the pacemakers just starting to struggle a little bit, but we are 40 minutes in to the women's race now, and they'll be slowly making their way towards Tower Bridge and the halfway point, but they've gone through Cutty Sark. So as the elite men were starting, I believe the women will have gone through Cutty Sark, through that 6 mile point. They'll be closer now to 8-9 miles, ticking them along nicely, and it's good to see that that group is still together. Last year's winner, Yahalu's now a little bit more prominent at the front of that group. Peres Jepchirchir right in the mix with that kind of style that leans forward a little bit. She is, for me, the one to watch. I know Bridget Kosgei has gone. If you are just joining us, that's the big news in the women's race, actually, that Kosgei did step up within the first half a mile, and that was a real shame, but she was nursing a hamstring problem into today's race. You can see Dibaba, that distinctive style of Dibaba, over on the far side of the road. But yeah, Jepchirchir just sat in there behind the pacemakers, looking really, really good, and her marathon record speaks for itself. And I think now she is probably the favourite within that group.
I think you could be right, Lewis. Peres Jepchirchir in there is the reigning Olympic champion. She's got a fast time to her name as well, but I'm interested when we see these athletes that can triumph in the non-pace-made races, but have had time in their career to back that up with a good time as well. I think that makes them a very well-rounded athlete to me. And we've got the likes of Ayana and Dibaba are definitely, we know they're good in the championships. Ayana, you know, running away to that Olympic title back in 2016, but they haven't proven that yet on a marathon stage. Peres Jepchirchir as Olympic champion certainly has, and it was wonderful to hear the Kenyan talk in the press conference. This is her debut at the London Marathon, and she was absolutely delighted to finally be here. She said, you know, it's a marathon she's watched very closely over the years, and to finally be here as part of this race was very, very exciting for the Olympic champion, and she looks really ready for it. She's been very content to slot in there behind the pacemakers.
And the overhead shots now of our elite men.
They did start in Blackheath and Greenwich Park, as all our athletes will, through this first 5K section away from central London. They then swing back round on a hairpin, work their way towards Cutty Sark. We have seen all of our elite fields through there already, and then make their way further towards central London. We've already seen Marcel Hoog over Tower Bridge, the elite wheelchair women not far behind. The athletes will then head to the Isle of Dogs and Cutty Sark, then head to Limehouse, where they'll see Rainbow Row, a lovely feature here of the London Marathon, and then make their way towards the deceptively long finishing straight. The embankment can take you a long time if you've misjudged your effort, but you will finally get to Birdcage Walk alongside St James's Park, 2 right-hand turns, one to take you in front of Buckingham Palace, the second to take you to the finish along the Mall, the iconic backdrop there of Buckingham Palace to complete the London Marathon.
And Marcel Hug is well underway on that map that we just saw. He has gone over Tower Bridge, as Hannah rightly said. He'll be making his way down towards the Isle of Dogs and to that financial district of Canary Wharf. And he has a huge lead. And it is all about Marcel Hug against the course record. To set 2 course records in a week would be quite astonishing, particularly given only 5 days ago he was in Boston competing. That was on Monday. Well, 6 days ago to be precise, but with a lot of travel between that and a bit of fatigue coming into this race. But he did say he felt fresh, he felt good, and we saw him sat in for the first sort of 10K in the race. He's had a look around, maybe even had a conversation with 1 or 2 people. Do you fancy it? And obviously not, but he does, and he is after that course record today. The Silver Bullet is in full flight, and he looks really, really smooth, doesn't he?
17 miles already for Marcel Hug, and still a group of 4 here in the women's elite wheelchair race. Manuela Schär, for the first time, has hit the front. So we'll have to reassess the field here, because I think I'd misidentified some of these athletes. So Manuela Schär in the lead, Madison de Rosario in second. And that's Susanna Scaroni with the blue helmet there. She's in 3rd place. It could be Katalin de Brunner with the white helmet there in 4th place. Okay, so we have confirmed that it is the 4 favourites here in this women's race. Manuela Schär has won this race many, many times. Couldn't start last year due to illness. Couldn't finish the Boston Marathon on Monday with a puncture. There's ever someone out for redemption, it's this Swiss woman. She is the world record holder as well. It's very interesting to hear Manuela Schär talk about the fact she'd never had a puncture in a race before. She's never carried a puncture kit. At the press conference, she was still 50-50 about whether she'd pack one here for London. I think some of the athletes kind of think if you've got to stop and repair a puncture, is your race over anyway? And we saw, of course, that happen to David Weir at the Commonwealth Games this summer as well. Went from gold to nothing because he didn't bring his puncture kit.
As we see that lovely aerial shot of the men's race, and a roller coaster to the side. It will be a roller coaster ride for a lot of our marathon runners today. The old term, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it is very much about conserving energy in these early stages. Just picking up on those helmets in the elite women's wheelchair race, it's Catherine de Brunner who has the change of helmet. Hannah, she is down on our list to have the white helmet. She's actually with the darker helmet, so the black helmet. So de Brunner is in that lead group. We have identified those 4. And these elite men, we can see Kiptum is now back to business. Sat behind those 3 pacemakers in the nice pink and yellow strips. Those bibs really nice and easy to identify for our pacers. And we can see Bekele is on the back of that group. We know Kenenisa is here. I don't think he's in the shape that he once was when he really went after that world record at the time that has now been moved forward by Eliud Kipchoge. But I was on the side streets of Berlin that day and watching Bekele attack that, but I don't think he's in that shape today, and you can already see him sat on the back of that group. And Kelvin Kiptum is the one paying close attention. I've got my eyes on Kip Ruto. I think it's a really interesting story. You know, his training partners 1st and 3rd in Boston on Monday, clearly in good shape. You know, the manager of those athletes flew over to London. He was super keen to come and watch him here on the streets again in London. Could he do it again, Hannah?
I think he could. He's got the experience. I mean, Kelvin Kiptum for me is he's raw. We don't know an awful lot about him. What we do know, that fantastic 2:01 from Valencia, 3rd fastest all time. He actually ran the 2nd fastest half marathon. No, sorry, the fastest ever 2nd half marathon in a marathon. He closed faster than anyone else has ever closed. And Kip Ruto will be aware of that. Valencia, that's one question I was going to ask you, though. You're very experienced in the marathon scene. Conversion from Valencia to London, yeah, that's a phenomenally fast course. They get very good conditions. What would you expect the differential to be between those 2 courses?
Yeah, that is a really good question. The biggest difference for me is I do it on a bike, so I know I'm cheating usually, but it is good to go around and get a feel for the course and see how it is. It is exceptionally flat. The roads are perfect. And the biggest thing for me for Valencia is I was there from the Friday until the Monday, and every day you could have run a marathon there, it would have been perfect conditions. You know, it's December the 3rd last year. They had those ideal conditions. Today is not bad in London. We do have a little bit of a breeze, but it's not too bad. But with the underpasses and the bridges in London, I think that adds a little bit more to it. So I would say from Valencia to here, the conversation I've had with the athletes who I coach, who have also done the same, is we're probably looking at about a minute, I think. If we say, okay, given those underpasses, given those little bit of the inclines that you have to take in and maybe the conditions, it could be about a minute differential, but we shall see.
Here's the chase pack at the moment, not all that far behind. I'm just getting up to that first 5 kilometers here in the elite men's race. And they'll have to resist chasing that pack. It is too early to tip yourself into the red. There is Sir Mo Farah of Great Britain leading the British Championships at the moment. Brett Robinson of Australia could have a wonderful ride here, could really benefit from the atmosphere that's going to be generated for Mo Farah and the pacemaking as well. Andy Butchart wearing number 4 on his back there. Very familiar. Mo's saying go a bit quicker. Oh, that's bold. It's very early in the race here, but Mo Farah is quite clearly saying, come on, Andy, let's pick it up a little bit. Butchart's been training out in Potchefstroom in South Africa. And so 4:35 for 3 miles. That could be the lead group rather than the pack we're looking at the moment. Brett Robinson, the athlete just behind Mo Farah, is the new Australian record holder. Hit that mark in December in Osaka. And I was around about 2:07 something, but we could see Brett Robinson operating right around that Australian record pace today. It would be wonderful if we could see Mo Farah underneath that 2:08. But that's the lead athletes. The other pack down the road, 14:30 through the first 5 kilometers.
Yeah, and back to that front pack. But I'm hoping that Andrew Butchart was just saying to Mo, just calm down a little bit here, because it's already quick. We can see them chasing this pack down. We know Mo isn't probably in the shape that he's been in the past, or we didn't think he was, but the word from the team was that he actually is in training, you know, and his training partners are going well, and he's been training with them. So you can have bad days and off days coming into the marathon, and he might be feeling good. But if it was me personally sat with him there as pacemaker, I'd be saying, well, if you're feeling good, let's do it in the second half. Let's not do it in the first 10, 15 minutes of the race. You've got plenty of time. One thing I did notice, though, Hannah, was just how serious he looked. The talk in the week was how much he's going to enjoy it, but he's definitely gone into Mo mode, which is good. But we can see the elite men up here, and then the overhead shot. And I think we're going to zoom back to the women's field to see what's going on at the front. And here's Hassan.
Hassan just looking a little bit uncomfortable. I was watching on one of our other screens here we've got available to us. They've just gone through a drink station here. It is incredibly interesting. Safan Hassan has been observing Ramadan this month. She doesn't really take on drinks in competitions anyway. Of course, she's traditionally a track runner, and it's done some phenomenal half marathons, but it's done those without drinks. And her and her coaching team have really been trying to work with Safan Hassan to say, you've got to take a drink on board. Now, look, the other women around her are discarding bottles at this point. Safan Hassan is not holding one. And when you've got an athlete that doesn't like taking on drinks, that is fine. But they've got to do it at this stage. We do think she has been collecting drinks, but it's going to be really interesting to watch. Like I say, she's been trying to learn how to do drinks. They're not been doing drinks through Ramadan because she's been observing that. That would have been a large period of the end of her build-up here for London. But with the conclusion of Ramadan on Thursday, we will see Safan Hassan take on drinks during this competition. London Marathon have actually put together some really great advice for the mass participation athletes as well on how you could best prepare for the London Marathon while observing Ramadan. Safan Hassan, she looked like she was uncomfortable and not enjoying herself, but she does seem to have attached herself back onto this lead pack.
Yeah, I'm just currently watching a replay of when she did take that drink, Hannah, and a couple of things that have come to my mind is she dropped off the back of the group to take a drink. She took the drink. She then raced forward to hand it to somebody else within the group. She then dropped back off. She looked really uncomfortable, holding her chest, almost a little bit sickly. And she kind of she's taken the time off the back of the group. And then, as you said, she's slowly made her way back to the group. So she's clearly not comfortable with doing that. She may be kind of learning on the course as we speak and learning as she goes, but she is making positive moves past that pacemaker at the back of the group. She's 52 minutes in. But one thing we know about the marathon, and one of Paula Radcliffe's top tips yesterday that I seen on socials, was fueling is essential. You know, it's like your fuel tank. For those of you sat at home wondering what happens during a marathon, it's like that battery on your phone. It does slowly deplete over time. That energy starts to drain down just as it would on your phone battery. And you've got to try and stop that draining as quickly as you would want it to. So you've got to take some fuel on board. We've heard stories in the past of people, you know, Jake Smith springs to mind when he did a marathon without any fuel. And people kind of say, oh, well, you know, do you need fuel? Well, you know, the best in the world certainly do. And, you know, the world records are being set with taking drinks on board. So it's something Hassan is probably going to have to get used to. She's clearly trying today, but she's clearly struggled with it early on.
I think that's one of the, we talk about shoe technology developments, but for me, the nutrition enhancements that have gone into marathon running, it was always very traditionally, you've got to be able to run on empty, to, you know, boost your fat burning system and all that. And it seems to me that that consensus is changing now. You can have these drink stations every 5 kilometers. We've got very sophisticated drinks from a range of different companies that really mean if you get it right, you should never really be running on empty. And that's why we've seen what Eliud Kipchoge in that sub-2 challenge. For me, that really blew the doors wide open on sports nutrition and marathon running, because he was taking fluid and energy and fuel on board for the whole competition. And that's something everyone's then learned from that and tried to introduce it to their racing.
Yeah, and I think that's what's fascinating about the sport itself is, you know, the shoes have obviously been a huge talking point, and we kind of have a laugh and a joke about it. There's always a talking point on every single athletic show that we watch, whether it's the track, whether it's the road. But also there's been advancements in other areas, as you say, like that is the idea of it. Surely we're trying to push boundaries, we're trying to explore the best possible option to improve performance. And that can come in a variety of ways, whether it's drinks, whether it's gels. You know, I'm sure in 10 years' time, hopefully we'll still be sat here talking about other things that have progressed which weren't available in our day, as we say back in the day. And, you know, these great runners who we've had start the races today, I hear some people from the northeast in particular, people like Charlie Spedding, who's won on the streets in London, say they used to fuel on things like Mars bars, which is absolutely bonkers. And some people still do in the masses. But at the front end, that sports science has advanced, and as a result, we're seeing faster and faster and faster times.
We really are, and I love the intensity that we can see in the second half of these races, and that lift in pace. You know, traditionally you'd want to be maybe under pace at the first half and hope to hang on, whereas we know that our athletes are really going to push on. So it does look like we're down to 2 pacemakers at the moment. Sisay Gola, pacemaker number 1, and Catherine Rellin, pacemaker number 3. Both of these athletes very good. Gola has done a 2 hours 20 marathon. It's pacemaker 5 and 3. My apologies. So we have lost Sisay Gola. So maybe that's the organisers knew that they had to upgrade some of the other athletes into this group. Aminat Ahmed of Ethiopia running up a group here and doing a fantastic job. Catherine Ryland to her side, 65:39 half marathoner. So these women are in very, very good company. All of the pacemakers are kind of contracted to go to halfway. And they really hope that they might push on from there.
Jess Warner Judd there doing a great job of pacing that group, the familiar style of Jess, who got married to Rob last year, so big congratulations there. And that's our first glimpse of the lead Brits. You can see Callie Thackeray there is leading Samantha Harrison. So Samantha Harrison, we believe, is the lead Brit on course. It's going to be between Samantha Harrison and Alice Wright from the elite race, all being well, unless somebody from the masses springs a surprise. But Sam has been in fantastic form, 69 minutes recently on the road for a half marathon. That was only some 3 weeks ago, coached by Vince Wilson. Vince, a good friend of mine from up in the northeast, and he's doing a fantastic job with Sam and developing her. Her story is quite incredible, isn't it, Hannah? You know, a 3-hour marathon runner. She describes herself as what was a bit of a gym bunny, like going to the gym, and real inspiration for anybody there who is listening, who's maybe never tried running before, that it might just be for you. You never know until you try, and that's certainly what Sam's found. And she is taken to the marathon pretty well with her debut, and we'll see how well she can go today. But I'm going to call Samantha around sort of 2:26, 2:25. That's my prediction for Sam today.
Great to see help there from her training partner, Callie Thackeray. No help on the roads here for Marcel Hug of Switzerland. Coming up on 68 minutes through the clock. Now, I'd missed Marcel Hug actually bettered his course record last year. Notched it all the way down to 1 hour 24:38, but I do still think he's on pace for that as he makes his way through Rainbow Row. This is a section of the course that was introduced last year by the London Marathon to support the LGBTQIA+ community. And we can tell from that marker there, that means that Marcel Hug is on his way towards the 35-kilometre mark. He's literal streets ahead of anybody else in this field. The wheelchair athletes do get first look at the course, first dibs, and first cheers from all those crowds as well. Marcel Hug will be the first elite athlete our supporters will see out on the roads. There he is, tracking that blue line as he moves towards the final 10 kilometres.
And that is Manuela Shah leading the women round. Susanna Scaroni still in there too, and it is still the 4 athletes we identified earlier. So Madison De Rosario and Catherine De Bruyne still in there, and that looks to me, Hannah, like they're through Canary Wharf. You can see the big tall buildings. I was in there, I actually worked in there one time. I was at mile 19. I set out all the banner in and then stood in there, and on a hot day it gets really, really warm because of the buildings, but today it'll be a little bit cooler, but it also be sheltered as well, so they'll get a bit of shelter going through there with those tall buildings from any wind that is on course. It doesn't look too bad out there, but it is a nice section because it is sheltered and it gets really noisy, particularly as the crowds start to build.
It's a man of the people, Lewis, setting up the course one year, running it another, commentating on it after that. So here are the elite men, still a nice big group as they move towards 25 minutes. All the usual competitors in there. None of the drama that we saw in that men's race, the women's race, losing world record holder Bridget Kosgei very early on, but everyone looks content to sit in. Kelvin Kiptum just at the 4 at the moment. Amos Kiprutu, you can see him now on the left-hand side of your screen. And the green Adidas kit, Kiprutu just a shade ahead. Tamarit Tola, and that's Legacy there, just sat in. That's another athlete I'm pretty excited to see how he runs today. Will Gebrselassie is in there too.
Just looking at the tracker, Hannah, the paces they've gone through, because obviously we've not been able to catch all the splits, but I did quickly check on Mo Farah's progress through that first 5K, 2:04:23 pace. Wow. So we were right. We did think it was fast. It's obviously faster in this front group, and we will keep you up to date with as much progress as we can on the course. But there's a great tracking app. You know, download the London Marathon app, track for yourself at home if you're watching, if you want to track the Brits who are on course, if you're with us here in the UK, or if you're worldwide and there's somebody you're looking out for, then download the app, track the athletes yourself, and you'll get a really good glimpse of every split. You get them every 5K as they go through those 5K checkpoints, and you can start to see what pace they're operating at.
Another look at the elite women, just past an hour on the clock. Chepkarui checking her watch here. She was a late entry. Chepkarui, she was due to run in Boston last week, but had visa issues, so she changed her mind and ran here. She said she did have 2 or 3 weeks to prepare, but Boston Marathon's very hilly. I think Chepkarui must have done some really difficult training, and then perhaps a relief here to be on a flat course. Now, is that a grimace from Sifan Hassan? She's clutching her hip. Is this just a stretch? A bit of cramp in the quad there for Sifan Hassan. That's not good. We're just passing the 19-kilometre mark here. Cramps are not uncommon at all in the marathon, but 19 kilometres is pretty early to start having issues. This could be a nightmare for Sifan Hassan. She was being very open in media. She said a while ago, will I defeat the marathon, or will the marathon defeat me? And she repeated similar sentiments in the press conferences in the last couple of days, clearly really struggling with her left hip there. She said she's been nervous the whole build up to this. You know, could she even finish? She said this was an experiment as well. She very much wants to do a track season at those World Championships in Budapest this summer, but was interested and intrigued to try out the marathon distance. But Lewis, you work with people in the marathon. If you start getting a cramp, stomach cramp, maybe that's one thing, but that looks much more like a muscle cramp from Hassan very early in the race.
At this level, I believe right now Hassan should be thinking about stepping off, saving herself for another day, not causing too much damage. She's clearly out of the race. It's going to be really hard for her to get back on it. That race is absolutely stacked at the front. There's a big group of them. It's not like there's somebody out there solo that potentially could come back to her. To me, it looks like it could be a little bit of ITB as well. You know, the ITB went down towards the knee. She keeps going towards the hip flexor, towards the glute. She was trying to stretch it off there with a little bit of a pigeon stretch. So that could just be compressing down the ITB into the quad as well. But there's clearly issues. We saw when she took that drink, it just, to me, it didn't look like she was running fluidly. It looked like she was just limping a little bit, and maybe she was feeling it early on. But let's see what happens. She may be able to potentially stretch it off, but I'm not so sure. I think there's a long, long way to go. You know, it's not like a track race. If you get a little problem, you can kind of push through it. 5K, 10K, even on the road. A marathon is a completely different beast. You know, she's an hour and 3 minutes in, and we're talking about another an hour and 10, an hour and 15 minutes, and that's at best case scenario. So, yeah, it's going to be a real struggle for Sifan on the way home, but hopefully, you know, hopefully she's fine and she can run it off. But maybe she might want to think about just stepping off.
You see the pace that lead group are moving out. We saw Sifan Hassan stop a couple of times to stretch, and that has just widened up that gap. And Hassan's got a choice now to make. Does she complete the race and a marathon experience? She probably doesn't want to risk an injury at this stage. You know, she is targeting that track season. I was worried what would happen to Hassan as we move towards 18, 20 miles. But to have an issue so early on, that's such a shame. And is this group just making their way up the slight hill here onto Tower Bridge? Big crowds. We talk about how it's hard not to get carried away at this stage in the London Marathon. This is a big landmark, and I think you could be wrong in thinking, oh, I'm halfway, but you're not. This is not even halfway yet. But it's a lovely stretch here as they cross the River Thames, and they'll have to work slightly pushing up onto the bridge. 64.58 through 20 kilometres. Many of the main competitors in there. Sifan Hassan, the first casualty at the moment. She has taken her 20-kilometre drink. That's good to see. She'll be really, really hoping that hip cramp or whatever she's dealing with here, quad hip, just starts to ease off. That's the sort of thing that happened in training. You stop straight away. You gotta go. Nah, not messing with that. But in a race scenario, it's a different kettle of fish.
Well, what's really interesting, Hannah, is she's right near the Elite Athlete Hotel now, and that maybe play on her mind. Do I step off now? We saw Mo do it a couple of years ago when he was pacemaking. It's the perfect place to step off, so that might be going through her head. But we can see Mo as we speak, and Butchie at the front there, and Brett Robinson looking super cool. Hat was probably a wise choice today with the rain. I had that discussion with a few people this morning about, you know, maybe put that cap on. You can see the elite men just being a little bit careful. We spoke about those shoes being a little bit higher. The stack height is higher these days. That makes them a little bit more unstable. They don't have as much grip as they used to because they're designed to go super, super quick. So they're going to have to be careful around here, around the Cutty Sark, because that does look quite slippery underfoot. You can see it's a lot smoother than the road, that surface around there. It's not really designed to be ran on at this speed, so they're going to have to be a little bit careful as they go around the Cutty Sark and just make sure that there's no accidents around there. But that's the first landmark for the men ticked off. They'll be coming, well, actually, they've gone through 10K, haven't they?
That's a lovely running from the men. Definitely the heaviest we've seen the rain at this section. We got our first hint that it might be wet down there when Alexa Marcel Hughes swung round. These are the lead athletes. Just a tiny bit further down the road than Brett Robinson and Mo Farah. They've taken their drinks, thrown them to a side. On for around about 2:03 pace at the moment. We think this group, that course record 2:02.37. Amos Kiprutu was very bold. He did say he thought he could attack that course record. certainly on at the moment, as long as the weather doesn't deteriorate too much. I guess one of the good things about rain is it often means the wind is a little bit less. You need to certainly take wet conditions over windy conditions.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we get a glimpse at the British contingent. Dewi Griffiths on the back there, Chris Thompson in the on-strip, and there's last year's British winner, I believe, Gav Selassie in the Shettleston, and a nice headwear there to go with it. Like we said, the hats will be trying to keep warm, trying to keep that rain out the faces, but there is going to be a battle of the Brits going on. Ben Connor going through as well. He ran I watched him run a very, very controlled half marathon, and I was very impressed. That was a run-through event in Leicestershire that I was there on the bike, and he just looked super, super composed that day. Phil Sesamon, he's been the British winner around here before. He's looking good, tucked in that pace as well. Paula Surafel debuting for the first time. Luke Caldwell, based out in the States, he's apparently in good shape. We saw him have a good debut last year, the Houston Marathon. Interesting one with Tomo, actually. His mum's running today as well, so a big shout out to Wendy Thompson. And there you can see the Derby vest from the masses. Some of you may recognise that as David Bishop. He's formerly a triathlete. He's tucked in behind Adam Clark, the pacemaker there. So a big shout out to Bish, the former training partner at Loughborough University, and he's clearly running well from the masses. So that's great to see.
Yeah, we knew Adam Clark was due in there to be pacing, I think around about 2:15. So he has collected the elite starters. They'll have their name on their chest, and then the numbers indicate those championship starters. So they're a bit further down the road. They're having some great runs there from the British athletes. Marcel Hoog is having a great push. He's not got far to go at all. He's on the embankment now. 1 hour 19 on the clock. Can he challenge his own championship record, his own course record from last time round, 1:24:38? That's about all he's got to motivate him right now. A few cowbells from the crowd and lots of cheers. Marcel Hoog of Switzerland's head down, pumping those arms as he moves through 40 kilometres. So just 2K to go for Marcel Hoog.
Don't the conditions look so different? You can see the hoods are still up on the spectators. The rain is there, it's drizzling, but it is a lot heavier early on in the race, back towards Cutty Sark, where we saw our elite men go through there, and the British contingent all going through that 10K mark. To give you an idea, that group that we did see were around 2:10 pace, so the British group there. But as for Hoog, he's in a pace of his own. It's been almost from gun to tape. He sat in for the first 10K, which is ironically the pictures we just saw, and then from there, out of Cutty Sark, he has been a man on a mission, and the Silver Bullet has put his head down, and he is going to back up his Boston win with a win here today in London, all being well, Hannah, and barring disaster. You never know with wheelchair racing, as you say, punctures and mechanicals and those sort of things all to consider, but he has a healthy lead.
He certainly does. Still a group of 4 here in this women's race. This is going to be nail-biting as we get towards their final few miles. They're around about 35 kilometres, this women's race. I think we've got all the main competitors up there in the lead at the moment. So is that Madison Rosario? That's the first time perhaps we've seen the Australian in the lead. We still do think we've got all 4 women up there. Susanna Scaroni, Manuel Shah, Madison de Rosario, and the defending champion, Catherine de Brunner. I think de Rosario is actually in 3rd at the moment because he's got a blonde ponytail down the back. All 4 women wearing black long sleeves here. Madison de Rosario, identifiable by the blonde ponytail. I think Scaroni has the blue cap on there. De Brunner with the white helmet, and Shah with the black. Apologies, I'm sure someone out there that knows exactly who each of these women are. And, tell you for sure what we have got is this 4-way battle, and look at that, the elite women crossing on the other side of the road. What a sight for the spectators.
It's the elite women, as Hannah said, on the other side of the road and in full flow now. 71 minutes on the clock. They have gone through halfway, and it is quick. It's not as quick as world record pace, and it's not as quick as a women's only world record pace, but it isn't too far outside of that, and all the main contenders are still there, barring a couple of early casualties, which are if you are just tuning in, you will notice Sifan Hassan is not in that group any longer, and she has actually stayed on the road, which is good to see. So hopefully it was just a little bit of cramp, and she has pushed through that. But the one we know about who will not be joining the road again is Brigid Kosgei, the current world record holder. Is off the road. She stepped off within half a mile. She clearly wasn't right. She felt that early. She made that sensible decision to step off, and she will be back to fight another day at another marathon, and hopefully here in London in the coming years. But the big players are still there. Dababa's still there. Jepchirchir at the front with that nice style leaning forward. Korea in there as well. Just starting to take a little bit closer order. It'll be interesting to see who makes that first move. We always talk about those moves coming. So between 16 and 20 miles, we're not too far away as they head down towards Island Gardens and Mudchute, and then head up towards Canary Wharf and into that financial district. And that's when the race will really start to unfold.
Here's Marcel Hug of Switzerland into the closing stages of the 2023 TCS London Marathon. This was no surprise at all. He shattered the course record in Boston on Monday. He's going to be very, very close to his own course record of 1:24.38 here this year. Marcel Hug heading towards his third consecutive London Marathon win. What can the rest of the wheelchair world do to deal with a silver bullet? Absolutely nothing here today in London. He's got time to celebrate. He is nearly a minute underneath his own course record. 55 seconds he's taken off that mark. What a week for Marcel Hug. He said he surprised himself in Boston last week. Fantastic recovery here 5 days later to better his own course record. He's absolutely nailed his preparation. Him and his team will be delighted with the phenomenal performances they put back to back, and they'll have a long wait till we see the rest of the men come across the line behind him.
Yeah, fantastic win for Hug, 6 days out from Boston. Absolutely incredible. Taking a drink now, Hannah. Yeah, he can finally take a drink. Is one thing that we discussed about how, you know, they're out there a lot shorter than our elite men and women runners. They cover around about 90 minutes in total, so fueling not as essential for the wheelchair athletes, but who does have a bottle in hand now and will be rehydrating fast after that effort as we pan back to the elite men's race.
So dominant for Marcel Hug. At the moment, it's not looking like we'll see anything. So in the rest of the races, it's all very closely bunched, very early stages here in this men's race. Plenty of time for someone to stamp their authority on it and break away. Amos Kiprutu did that last time round when we were here. It's just 206 days since the last London Marathon. That's the shortest gap we've ever had between two editions. Spent a few years holding this race in October, sort of kick-started by the COVID pandemic. So we had that wonderful race in October 2020. Well, it was wonderful to have something on. Whether the athletes felt like running round and round St James's Park, whatever it was, 17 or 18 times was wonderful, I'm not sure, but it was great for athletics fans. But we are back here in April. And Amos Kiprutu, I think, you know, we talk about that with the whole athletics schedule as well, with the World Championships in back-to-back years, and people only getting to be a world champion for a year, when normally they get to have that title for 2 years. Amos Kiprutu will be so keen to keep this title in his hands. We mentioned earlier on in the programme his teammate Evans Chebet successfully defended his Boston Marathon title. His another teammate Benson Kiprutu was actually third in Boston as well. He's the reigning Chicago champion. Their running team, it's called the 2 Running Club. They're based in Kapsabet in Kenya. They have won 5 of the last 7 World Marathon Majors. That is really something. Imagine being in a group of that caliber. Amos Kiprutu will not want Evans Chebet to have all the glory this week.
And there he is, Sir Mo Farah. I had a quick check at his pace through 10K, and they did slow a little bit. They did back it off. I think that was sensible, Hannah. We noticed they'd gone through 5K relatively quickly. Brett Robinson will be happy that he's got a little bit of pace-making team there. He's been in fine form, hasn't he? Really good form coming in. He had a choice to make. We were chatting to the team yesterday, and they were saying Brett was confident of going with this group. He wanted to go with this group. He could have chosen to go back a little bit and maybe go with the likes of Emil Carres, who are further back down the road, but he was confident in the shape that he was in, and he wanted to join this group with Sir Mo Farah. And are we just starting to see the first glimpses of Mo Farah dropping off the back of that group? I wouldn't be too worried at this stage. He does do this from time to time, doesn't he, Mo? He likes to have almost a little bit of a gap. He even used to do it on the track, didn't he? Where he just kind of step off a little bit. So 9 miles and a 4:43 mile.
So I think, yeah, we see these slight rises here in this course in London. It's not Boston Hilly. It certainly isn't. But maybe Mo Farah just choosing not to push into those little rises, just to let them play out. But I think you could see in the distance, perhaps, Emil Carres, our second place British athlete at the moment. We saw a big group of British athletes. I think Emil Carres could have his sights set on Mo Farah. Here's second place in the men's wheelchair race. Jets Platz just making his way in front of Buckingham Palace. This will be a brilliant career performance for Jets Platz of the Netherlands. A double para triathlon gold medalist with victories in 2016 and 2020 Paralympics. He's also won gold medals in hand cycling, in the road race and the time trial disciplines. So a very diverse athlete. Marathon debut last year here in London. Finished 5th. Made some odd choices on his line. I think missed out in the end on that sprint finish to the line for the final space on the podium. Hasn't left anything to chance here this year in 2023. He committed to that lead group, and we haven't seen a lot of the coverage of that chase pack. Jed Platz has managed to separate himself from the rest of the field. He will come home in second place, 1:28:45 or so on the clock for Jets Platz. The Netherlands. He looks delighted with that. That is his first World Marathon major podium. Apologies, no, it's been third in New York. And back on another podium here in London.
Yeah, big well done to Jets Platz there, finishing off in second in the elite men's wheelchair. Following Marcel Hoog across the line. For those of you just joining, that is second place in the elite men's wheelchair race. Marcel Hoog has already flew around the Silver Bullet, finishing off, and we're back to the elite women's wheelchair race, who won about 1:30 on the clock, just going under one of the bridges. They'll have had a little downhill into this bridge and maybe a little bit of then an uphill. I believe that might be the one after Canary Wharf that they go under, that underpass, where the Garmin starts going crazy and the masses go crazy. They can't get their signal on the watch. And we're just having a look at who we have got in that lead group. So Scaroni still sits in second place, and it's still our main 4 contenders in there. And it's going to be all to play for Hannah in the final stages.
So there it is. Katalin de Brunner on the front at the moment. This was a very different race last time round. She was pushing all on her own at this point, on the way to a new course record of 1:38:24. If my computer's to be believed, they are 2 seconds underneath that pace, but they've got a big group. They can work together here. Katalin de Brunner had a wonderful marathon debut, winning Boston last autumn. Backed that up with a win here. But Madison de Rosario and Manuela Schär were both ill last year. They withdrew. And that's the athletes on the inside there. See Manuela Schär closest to the blue line. Madison de Rosario, the Australian, just pushing herself into the lead. Those 3 women spread across the road. And that's before you even mention Susanna Scaroni with the blue helmet, last week's Boston champion. This is a high quality group of 4, just 3 places available on the podium. And they won't be thinking about that. They will be thinking about the win. Madison de Rosario picked up that second in Boston. This would be a real return to form for the Australian if she could take the win here today.
Just looking behind Hannah in the white strip, is that one of our male athletes? Yes, it is. Yeah, I was thinking we didn't see earlier pictures of the chase pack, so I thought it must be one of our male wheelchair athletes, which shows the incredible pace the women are pushing at. That lead 4 well and truly away.
Tomoki Suzuki of Japan will come across the line for third. We saw him pushing the pace early on. That's a great third place for him. He's won the Tokyo Marathon before. And he did just miss out on the podium last year. It was a big sprint finish between him and David Weir. But Suzuki is on the podium this time. Daniel Romanchuk not able to repeat his silver medal performance of last year. This will happen. You know, Romanchuk was second in Boston last week, perhaps didn't recover quite as well as some of his competitors. Romanchuk having to settle for fourth. And there is the wonderful David Weir, moves through 200 metres to go. It isn't going to be a 20-second podium for David Weir. He's done this race 24 times. He was asked, you know, when are you going to stop? And he said, well, I've definitely got to do 25, haven't I, if this is number 24. David Weir, a brilliant fifth place. I don't think he's even been outside of the top 5 in all 24 of his attempts at this race. David Weir, another brilliant race. Did take the win in Paris a few weeks ago. He said he was in heavy training for that. And it's a brilliant, backed up that performance there with the 5th place. He does look absolutely exhausted.
And what a servant he's been, hasn't he? He has been a real inspiration to many. And they've got the academy down there. And he is a local boy as well, isn't he? Kingston area. It's great for him to still be competing on the streets of what he calls home. And as we say, he's been a fantastic servant for British sport. And he has really propelled the wheelchair racing into the shop, particularly in the UK, but around the world. I think people like Marcel Hug will be first to say that we have certainly inspired him as well.
Back to the elite women's race, we had a wonderful host of pacemakers there. Catherine Relin did a great job, and especially Aminat Ahmed being moved up from one of the slower groups up into the main group, but they have now stepped aside and we've got a race on for real. The field just starting to spread out a little bit. Almaz Ayana, for me, she's not looked totally comfortable. You can always see her posture there. She's leaning back just a tiny bit. She hasn't looked as smooth as maybe she did in Amsterdam in her debut. You can see in the graphic there in our screens, we've got around about 10 miles to go. Almaz Ayana went through the first half in Amsterdam 69.26 and then increased their pace all the way to 67.54. So we know the Ethiopian has got the ability to close fast, but she's just struggling at the back of this group ever so slightly. Halfway split for the elite women was 68.29. So they've really got to get a push on here in the second half if they're going to continue their attempt at Mary Katani's women's only world record of 2 hours 17 and 1 second.
So that's 68.29, did you say, Hannah? So yeah, so 2:17 pace. So they've got to get a shift on in the second half. You'll notice that no pacemakers there now, so it's down to this lead group. But there are plenty of them there. That's a big advantage. And if it turns into a race, that's sometimes where you can catch up seconds, even minutes in the closing stages, because you are racing each other as opposed to being out on your own. It's not just you against the clock. It's you against the other athletes, and that can really push them on. And if somebody does fancy it, they may force the pace, and then somebody else goes with that, and then everybody has to follow. So it's like the domino effect. Just a quick update from a British perspective. Sam Harrison's through halfway on 2:24 pace, so that's really, really strong. And she did look good in that group with Callie Thackeray pacing, so we'll keep you up to date with that British Championship race, which is going ahead. Samantha Harrison and Alice Wright battling that out in the elite women's race, but it's all eyes on the front currently. And Jep Chirchir, who we mentioned earlier, looking strong, leading from the front, good tactical racer, reigning Olympic champion. But she has a stack of athletes behind her who also know how to get the job done, whether it's on the track or the road. Yahalu, last year's winner, even after a fall, it's worth saying that as well. A little bit of a trip on a speed bump at around about mile 21. Still managed to rein it in and close strong. And DeBarber is still there on the other side of the road, the track specialist, turned to the marathon. And the one who I've got my eyes on at the back of that pack, who's done absolutely nothing at all so far, but sit there, is Ayana. And again, known for a big negative split over the 10K on the track when she set that world record. Known for a big negative split, Hannah, in her first marathon. Could she do the same again today?
We are in the very closing stages here of the women's wheelchair race, and we have still got 4 athletes. Catherine de Bruyne in the white helmet was the victor last time round. She had this race all her own way. We're on to Birdcage Walk. Lewis and myself have run an event called the Westminster Mile many times here round St James's Park. These are tight corners when you are going flat out, when you are tired, let alone when you are having to use a wheelchair to get round them. This is going to come down to racing lines, to racing tactics, who can hold their nerve, who can time their sprint finish to perfection. Manuela Shah at the moment at the back of the group. Last week's Boston champion Susanna Scaroni swinging to the side here, trying to get herself to the fore. Madison de Rosario has been pushing off the front for a little bit. And these women will be so familiar with racing each other. Let's hope they've had a careful look at the closing stages of this course. We saw a great sprint finish between Daniel Romanchuk and Marcel Hugh last year. They almost clashed around one of the corners. I say 2 very tight right-hand turns. Madison de Rosario choosing at the moment to just glide towards that corner. Will anyone try and stay wide? Will they try and take the shorter line round the inside? You'll see the women take their hands off the wheels, and there they are steering, and then they'll pump straight back in to try and regain that speed. 385 yards to go. 4 women in contention for this elite wheelchair race. This 2023 edition has been fascinating on the women's side. You can see them going flat out. 1 more corner left to navigate. They leave Buckingham Palace behind them. And has Madison de Rosario of Australia opened up a winning gap? Here goes Manuela Shah. She's pumping her arms hard. Has Manuela Shah got one last burst of energy to get herself back towards Madison de Rosario? The cadence on Shah's arms is faster than Madison de Rosario. Is she coming? Has the Australian got any idea that Manuela Shah is launching an attack behind her? Has she got any time to respond? It's going to come down to the line. Madison de Rosario trying to hold off Manuela Shah, and she does it. It is a win for the Australian. She opens her mouth in surprise. That was some finish from Madison de Rosario. What a well-timed effort. Manuela Shah puts to bed the demons of last week. DNF due to a puncture. But Madison de Rosario, that is a brilliant result from a woman that has been unable to make the start line the last few years through illness and various disruptions. What a return to the streets of London for the Australian.
Wow, what a finish. If we get any more finishes like that this afternoon, well, this morning to this afternoon, we're in for a real treat, because for the top contenders, right in contention until the end. Rosario did have the outfit change in the end, Hannah, you were right. It was making her struggle throughout that race, but one thing is for sure, she brought it home in style. How are they still talking at the end? That is incredible, isn't it? It's just amazing that, you know, what they put their bodies through, that push to the line, that sprint finish, you've seen it absolutely all out into that line. And this is what I love about our sport. You know, rivals on the course, and then it's all smiles after, and in some cases best of friends off it, which is just amazing.
Love the emotion from Madison de Rosario here. Just checking, did I really cross the line first? She had to just keep her head down, pump all the way to the finish. And also what I think you could see as they were just finishing, it's just the shake in their hands as well. That's how much effort has gone into that race.
And imagine it does get a little bit colder as well. It's like when you're on a bike, isn't it? You know, when you're running, you're using the whole body, and that's keeping you a little bit warm. But when you're in a bike, you're in more of a static position, like you are in the chair, and that can just make you cool down a little bit. Now, well, this is interesting, isn't it? We thought Hassan was gone. She was holding the hip, holding the quad. Here's me saying maybe she should even step off. And now that gap isn't as big as it was. Is she even closing it down? So Hassan battling through. Be interested to see what goes on in the latter stages. If she was struggling with things like cramp early on, will that come back to bite her? But we have had people drop off that lead group. The lead women are away. But unfortunately, it is starting to crumble. So it's the first signs, Hannah, that we're starting to see that elite women's group break up.
And here's what we'd expect this time in the race, and that is Almaz Ayana as well of Ethiopia just starting to drop off the back of the group. When she won Amsterdam, that was the fastest debut 2 hours 17:20. That was surpassed by Tessenbet Guide in Valencia, but Almaz Ayana, could she be the next casualty of this lead group and give Sifan Hassan something to aim at? That's a brilliant resurgence there from Sifan Hassan, and I don't know whether it means this group is slowing if they're settling slightly, and I mean the drop off there of Ayana implies that the pace has still been high quality here at the front and that they are pushing on.
Yeah, and it is high quality everywhere you look on the road, isn't it, right now? You know, there's champions everywhere. There's course record holders of different marathons. There's fastest second halves of marathons. And like you say, Ayana is the one who's paid the price. But at the front, Yahalu looks good. She sat in there. Jepchirchir is the one forcing the pace, which is interesting. You know, we said she's a good tactical racer. She was the one who beat Kosgei unexpectedly. I think that's fair to say at that Olympics. Brigid Kosgei was a big favourite then. She's an amazing character as well. I listened to a Runners World podcast with her just the other day, and about all the amazing work she does back in Kenya, and she is really a hero. They go back to the village, have a celebration when she returns. They're all singing and dancing. I mean, Ayana doesn't look too bad, does it? The cadence still looks pretty good. The shoulders are a little bit high though, and that maybe does suggest she's struggling a little bit as those shoulders just start to tense up just a little bit. But we are into the business end of the race now, 1 hour 30 in. About 50 minutes, just under 50 minutes to go for our elite women. And this is where it does start to get a little bit tougher.
And people talk about going through bad patches. Sifan Hassan, look, she has definitely closed that gap on Almaz Ayana towards the back of the picture we've got here. But, you know, it could be that Ayana is just maybe struggling with, a little bit with stomach cramps, with issues like that could evaporate. Oh, another word on another one of the athletes in there, Lemu Magatu of Ethiopia. She's just sitting there in the green Nike vest. She's had a very quiet race. Has been looking very comfortable, 3rd place last year.
Okay, so the elite men coming across Tower Bridge, and they will be approaching halfway. So that's their 20k split currently. Don't be misled by that. We can see 58, 55 on the clock, but that isn't the halfway split. That's a 20k split as our pacemakers just take a glance at the watch. Some of the elite men taking drinks on, and they will head down to that halfway split, and we will hopefully be able to give you that as they go through. But again, similar to the women, we do have a big group there, which is good to see. That should play out in the second half, which is all eyes on the elite men's field. I think Bekele may be just starting to struggle. You can see him playing around with his vest at the back. You can see he's maybe 5 or 10 metres off the back of that group, has a quick check of the watch, and maybe that's the first sign that the great Kenenisa Bekele is just struggling a little bit. That was a little bit dangerous, wasn't it? Kiptum apologising to the group, threw his water bottle down, and Gabriel Celeste at the back of that group nearly tripped on that water bottle. So a few words to the front, maybe a little bit of an experience there from Kiptum, and he is apologising. Obviously, nobody intentionally does that, to throw water bottles on the floor, and it's something you've got to discard of safely, but it was a little bit dangerous, but thankfully no fallers over that. It's something the course officials and marshals are so good at, clearing the course for the rest of the runners. But it's all part and parcel of the marathon and part of that puzzle that will be solved as we go into the afternoon. A great shot at Tower Bridge there, Hannah, look at that.
Glorious, even with a bit of overcast, but that is our typical British weather. Now, at this point, this was Mo Farah's first experience at the London Marathon. He came and pace-made and finished his effort round about here, but the plan is very much for Mo Farah to carry on. He's still flanked by Brett Robinson, the Australian, having a really good race. If anyone likes social media and podcasts and whatnot, Brett Robinson does a podcast called For the Kudos, and it's very, very good. He actually previewed this race on there and talked about his hopes and his ambitions for this race. But what was very interesting in that podcast, Brett Robinson, last race out was the World Cross Country. I think he came in the 30s. It was a very respectable performance, and he described that as the hardest thing he's ever done. You kind of think, well, someone's done a marathon. For them to describe World Cross as even worse does give you that insight into World Cross Country. And Brett Robinson is very interesting for me. He's an athlete. He's historically really struggled with a very debilitating stitch. And it's something he made his first progress at trying to control here I think it was in London, kind of in October, maybe it was before that. And then he really felt like he cracked that in Osaka, and that helped him to that Australian record. So let's hope that doesn't plague him in the later stages of this race.
Yeah, 2:07:31, that record. A new Oceanian record. Halfway for the men then. Kelvin Kiptum right at the front, 61:40. So 2:03:20 pace at the halfway, and that is about bang on, actually. You know, they weren't asking for much quicker than that. That was in and around what they're looking for, and you can see the pacemakers having a chat, and is that maybe the first signs of the conversation of, is this pace okay? Do we need to pick it up? How is everybody feeling? And Kiptum is the one who's barking the orders. Now, we did see that fast finish in Valencia. He did go super quick in the second half, and now he's asking the question to pace number 2. Have you got anything? If you're watching at home, the pacemakers are contracted to go to halfway if they can, and then from there it's about getting as far as they possibly can. So the next point for them will be 25k, hopefully 30k. I mean, as far as they possibly can, but you can see they are starting to struggle now with the pace, and he is raising it. I think, Hannah, and I'm sure you'll add to this, I think Kipton's had a word there and said, come on, let's get to work.
Yeah, that's Bernard Ngono of Kenya, pacemaker number 2, just saying to everyone, keep going. He'll be giving them some words of support there. But pacemaker number 2, Ngono, just having to step aside here. He might not have much more in his legs, or is he just going to tuck in and take a break? But he's leaving Daniel Mateko of Kenya at the front, pacemaker number 3, checking his watch. He's a phenomenal athlete, 58:26, his half marathon best. So when you come through in 61:40, you'd hope he's got another couple of, maybe another 5k in him. Daniel Mateko was actually 8th in the Oregon World Championships last summer in the 10,000 meters as well. That's exactly the sort of caliber you look for in a pacemaker. And Kiptum was imperious in the second half in Valencia. All of the men in this pack behind him will know how dangerous he could be in the second half. Maybe that puts the pressure on Kelvin Kiptum. He's not a kicker. It's not like someone else in the group has got to wrung the sting out of him. Are they waiting now to see what Kelvin Kiptum is going to do, what the Kenyan will show his cards at, and then they've just got to try and match that. No one could go with Kiptum in Valencia, and that allowed him to perhaps be a bit more relaxed and enjoy that. It's going to be a very different dynamic here on the streets of London if he tries to make a break.
Yeah, just looking at that visual of the women's race, you can see the puddles on the ground now. Hannah, it is coming down in the capital. The men's cadence was certainly picking up. I think they've picked up the pace, and the women's pace maybe picking up because we're starting to see gaps. But can you believe it? Hassan is right on the back of that group as people drop off, including, for the first time, Dibaba starting to see a little bit of a gap from that lead group. Yahalu still in there. Jepchirchir still forcing the pace. They grab their drinks bottles nice and safely from that table there. Nagurtu still in there as well. Jep Karui in there, but Dibaba is off the back of that group. But fascinatingly, Hassan has managed to get herself back on that group. Now, here's me saying she probably should drop out. It's probably the worst call ever. And she's now chasing people down. That would be, for me, one of the greatest comebacks of all time in a major marathon.
This would be really, really brilliant. And I think Jepchirchir, she's really pushing at the front. She's being aggressive. Sometimes we see moves like that, and then you see a drink station and go, okay, maybe makes sense. It might have just, some athletes really do like to spread the field out into the drink station, have a better look at their drink. But if Jepchirchir is on the charge, I hope for entertainment's sake, Jepchirchir just holds off for another 5 minutes, gives Hassan a chance to get back in the picture, because when you've made that effort, Sifan Hassan is moving faster than these women right now, desperately trying to get herself back on pace. She's got some brilliant targets there. Judith Correa, last year's 4th placer, is struggling there with Dibaba. If Sifan Hassan can latch onto those two and perhaps slingshot back to this top 4, but Jepchirchir looks full of running. She's been itching at the lead the whole time. Nagurtu, for me, she's got a look of distress on her face. I think that's more to do with perhaps rain in her eyes. But they've left Canary Wharf. They've left that financial district. Yahalu, last year's champion, tucked in there as well.
And there we see her, Hassan, taking the drinks on board, everything that we've spoken about earlier. She's getting that in, and more importantly, she has people now to pick off. So she can see the likes of Dibaba in front of her who dropped off that group, and that will give her that little bit of inspiration, that little bit of incentive, just to start to make her way back to that the lead group. That is currently the chase group, you see. This is the lead group on your screen now. Jepchirchir forcing the pace at the front, Yahalu tucked in there. That was a nice downhill section. It was actually one of my favourite viewing points on the course. I used to sneak out the back of Canary Wharf where it was a little bit quieter. And a slight course change here as well. They used to go up and down the bypass and back down, but now they've changed that on the course. But it's a good viewing point because it's just a little bit quieter. In fact, actually, they are swinging back round. So I know it was due to building work, construction work, why there was some changes here. And Jepchirchir is forcing the pace at the front. Yahalu looking good. One thing I would pick out here, you know, people often ask, don't they, about the perfect running style and what's the best style for the marathon. There is no perfect running style. Everybody's got their own style, and a great contrast there of styles in that lead group. It's about what gets the job done for you. You know, everyone has those little unique quirks.
I love that overshot picture of the men's elite field. You can see them almost in the V like that. That's what we saw in the sub-2 challenge. That's a very efficient way to run. I mean, it's putting all the pressure on our pacemaker here, Daniel Matejko, but he's doing a brilliant job. It's just allowing the likes of Kelvin Kiptum. He's tucked right in there, but you know, trying to pick out who's still in this group, and everyone really is still involved. We have lost Kenenisa Bekele off the bat, but Legesse, he's looking good there. High cadence on the side. And also one man that I was very excited to see commit to this group. We talk about you've got decisions to make in the pacemaking in these marathons. Jeffrey Kamomora of Kenya has put himself in here. He's rolled the dice ever so slightly. He did say in the press conference he feels like he's back in his 2017-2019 shape, which will be very, very exciting. Kamomora there in the cap in the middle of the group. He was 5th at the World Championships in the summer and 4th in the World Cross Country in Australia, just a few kind of weeks, a couple of months away. So I think that's a real return to form for Kamomora. And if he could stay in this group and stay in contention, that would be really exciting.
Just having a look at a few of the halfway splits there as well, Hannah. So a couple of the Brits around the sort of 2:10 mark, low 2:10 mark. Phil Sessamon in there. Chris Thompson a little bit further back, higher 2:10s. Ben Connor as well, right behind Phil Sessamon. Samantha Harrison, we know, was going well in the women's race. She's now through, or coming up to 19 miles, might have even passed through there, and she is still on for 2:24.20. But is that Mo Farah breaking away from Brett Robinson? It is, and is that Emile Caressin shot? Now, it's a bit of a blurry vision there, and as it starts to clear, you will notice the first signs of Emile Caress, where number 33, you can see behind him. Hannah spoke about that V shape earlier. Emile Caress recently set a new 10-mile British record, the Flying V, and they called it Breaking 10, and they did a great job of that. And now Emile Caress is chasing down Mo Farah for that first British spot. But interestingly, Mo has responded to that. You know, he's gone ahead of Brett, and he's forcing the pace. That's going to be fascinating, Hannah. That's going to be a real good race in the second half.
That could be some of the best British performances we've seen at the London Marathon for a long time. Of course, we did have that wonderful what did Mo Farah debut at? It was 2:08, wasn't it? I think that was here. So that was a good performance. But this is the lead men's race. That battle going on behind is for the British Championships. They could be closing up on the lights of Kenenisa Bekele. I don't think we've lost anyone else off this main men's group so far. 70 minutes on the clock. You almost feel like Kelvin Kiptum is just itching to get going. But if he's been sensible, he's looked around, seen that big group, and he's got to perhaps wait for it to whittle down a tiny bit.
Yeah, he looks like he's itching to go. Jepchirchir is just starting to say, move away, Yahalu, please. Give me a little bit of space. You know, I'm doing all the running here for you, but don't get too close. It's hard, isn't it, when you're following people? Everybody has their own style, and sometimes that means you're clipping each other. But you can see Yahalu is trying to hug that blue line. Jepchirchir is staying on the inside of that line, or the outside, depending on which way you look at it, and then just moves over to getting back on it. So clearly following that racing line there, just moving off the cycle path. But she is just saying, especially as she goes around the corner, let's just give each other a little bit of room here, ladies. You know, we don't want any accidents. We've seen Yahalu fall around about this point last year, a little bit later, around the 21-mile mark. And there are a few little turns and a few little speed bumps that they need to be aware of. I'm just looking at that gap back, and I think Hassan's charge is still coming. So she's reining people in as they come off the back of that group. I dare say it's too big of a gap, but I also said earlier that she probably should have stepped off the course. So I might as well say I dare say it's too big, because then she'll probably close it and we'll have the race of our life in our hands.
Yeah. Well, there's Judith Career as well, having a little bit of a resurgence here. She was 4th place last year, and could Judith Career and Sifan Hassan work together, that would be really nice. Sifan Hassan, for me, the Dutch woman, moving a lot better than she was. We saw her some 45 minutes ago now, but significantly struggling. I really am surprised to see that something like that, so a muscular kind of tension or pain at 61 minutes, apologies, for that to be able to calm down. I think Sifan Hassan might be pretty lucky.
This is the beauty and the beast of the marathon, isn't it? You can go through these phases. I talk a lot to Chris Thompson, who's a really good friend of mine, and he says you go through dark patches, you go through good spells. When he won in Kew Gardens, he notoriously backed off, let them go, and he came back at them. And sometimes it's just about finding your way to manage that. I refer to it with the athletes who I coach as your own little toolbox. You know, you've got to fill that up, and you've got to fill it up in training, you've got to fill it up in races, you've got to keep adding to it, because when it comes to those tough patches and those really dark patches, you've got to go in there. And that isn't always a physical toolbox, it's a mental toolbox as well. You see, it's about 10 seconds. It's not actually that significant. So to put that into perspective, the pace they're running, it's around about 60, 70 meters. It's not too big of a gap. And I think Hassan is rallying. That the question, I guess, Hannah, is should she go past now and just crack on herself and try and get back onto speed, or should she just sit there, bide the time a little bit? These are all questions that have got to be answered.
Great to hear the crowd support here on the streets of London. This is a wonderful day for our capital city here in the UK. They love watching these elite races. Some of the best athletes in the world come and grace our streets. But then we've got around about 46,000 mass runners that will make their way around the streets of London for pretty much the rest of the day. We always have our national news here picking up the very last finisher. It'll be someone in an astronaut costume or whatnot finishing around about 9 o'clock tonight. But they do enjoy seeing these world-class athletes.
Yeah, so Halu leading the way in the women's race, but Kelvin Kiptum, I believe at halfway he had a word with the pacemaker and he said, you know, let's get this moving a little bit. You can see it's now, rather than bunched, it's becoming a little bit more single file. It's almost like a track race, isn't it, Hannah, where they're getting in prime position, they don't want to be wasting energy. Kamara throws the gloves away, it's race mode, the hats come off. It's almost like it's made. It's like, we're going to up the pace, right, hats off, gloves come off, it's now race time. 74 minutes on the clock, we've gone through halfway, we're going to approach the business end, 15, 16 miles. Kamara looks good. The NN running team have a couple of runners in there. I'll be interested to see if they work together. You can see Legacy still in there as well. Gabriel Selassie on the back of that group. Tola's still in there. So all still to play for. Tura just in the orange strip. He looks pretty comfortable. Hat hasn't come off for him yet. Be interested to see if that comes off. So still cold out there on the streets of London, but warming up by the looks of things.
Tura is an interesting athlete to watch. Had a brilliant last few marathons. Won Chicago in 2021, second in Paris, sixth in Oregon at the World Championships, and then second in Chicago last autumn. Unsurprisingly, no races since for the Ethiopian. He's been resting up Sefui Tura, but he has had a quiet race. And I do look for these athletes that have just kept out of trouble. Amos Kiprutu, we've always been able to see him. It's almost like he does not want to let Kelvin Kiptum get any sort of a jump on him. The defending champion checking his watch as well. 1 hour 15 for the men. It's moving at a fast and furious pace. I'm sure it's going to continue.
As we go back to the lead women, it is really hotting up. Is that Rainbow Row they're going through now? That's the LGBTQIA+ community making some noise down there. I believe Jeanette Quachi will be down there later on the microphone for the BBC. And that is down at mile kind of 14 and 20 to 21, isn't it, down by Limehouse, Hannah? And they're putting on a really good show down there. And the women go through there and again, just have a little bit of a word. They are getting a little bit close together. It is getting into race territory now. It's very much about the pace early on, but as you can see them coming down the colourful Rainbow Road, doesn't that look great? They pass out of there and they will now start to get to the racing part of it. Some people describe the marathon as a 20-mile long run with a 10k race on the end. Well, that's what we've got in store for the women today. Just a quick update on Sam Harrison, 2:24.20 pace through 19 miles. So it's very, very good indeed from a British perspective.
I think Ginzebi Dibaba, who's just on our screens, is behind Judith Correa. Judith Correa did look like she was having a resurgence, but look at this from Sifan Hassan. The charge is on for the Dutch woman. When you talk about being into the final 10 kilometres, that is good territory for Sifan Hassan. Look at that, the masses on the other side of the road. They will be eagerly looking at these elite women and saying, what's going on? They'll be really, really interested to see. And what is happening is the reigning Olympic 10,000 metre champion is in to the final 10,000 metres, and that's a relief. I mean, I think I would, not that I've run a marathon, but I think when you come from a track background and you're finally in that territory that you might be familiar with, that could feel like a bit of a release, a bit of a weight off your shoulders. Sifan Hassan, she's working hard. She looks more comfortable than she did 50 minutes or so ago. And she's got quite the task on, because the likes of Peres Jepchirchir and Sheila Kipweri pushing on. And last time we looked at the main group, Yalimzer Fiahalu, no, she's back in the pack. Maybe she was just taking the racing line around that corner, but it was around about this stage last year when Yalimzer Fiahalu started launching her challenge that took her all the way to the win. And I just feel like Sifan Hassan, if she wants to contend for the win, she's only got around about a mile or a mile and a half to get onto this group. She could still pick up a podium spot here. This field could splinter. But I do think time is running out for the Dutch woman to get herself involved in the conversation for the win.
Yeah, we call this the latter stage of the marathon, but realistically, there's still 25 minutes worth of running left. There's a lot that can happen in that time frame. You see the masses on the other side of the road, all the club vests from the UK, people battling for their own position in their own time, but it's all about the women on this side of the road. You can see the crowds are starting to build, the hands are starting to clap. They'll be sore by the end of the day. They'll be clapping from now until the end. And it's a drink station, possibly the last one, Hannah, that they'll probably pick up now. I wouldn't think they'll go for many more after this. They'll go for this final drink, and you can see it's Peres Jepchirchir, 1:53.40 at 35k. Elima Gertu in there. Last year's winner, Yahalu, sat in there looking comfortable. She's in the NN running strip. And then just sat right on the back of that. And I think has kind of, again, kept her cards quite close to her chest and is looking pretty good in there. Jep Karui just comes round to the outside, the tall figure in the Adidas strip. And she hasn't done much at all, and we haven't mentioned her much at all, have we, Hannah?
Sheila Chepkarui is a really interesting athlete. She debuted in Valencia with 2:17.29. And that's a really good performance back from December. She hasn't done an awful lot since then, but again, not surprising when you're focusing on trying to give yourself a really good performance at a major marathon. It doesn't necessarily leave you that many opportunities to do any other races. But Jep Karui has had a very nice, quiet race. She hasn't got involved with Jepchirchir and Yahalu, seem to be clipping each other. The kind of angry looks from Jepchirchir back to Elemu Magertu, the Ethiopian. Looks better now than she did maybe sort of 5 kilometers or so ago. Elemu Magertu, she's the only athlete of these three outside of 2:17. She's 2:18.22 for a personal best, 5:22 through that 22nd mile, so just over 4 miles to go. Could expect a big push pretty soon from one of these top four. If you take the 35-kilometer split, on for around about 2:17.28 as a predicted finish, so that would leave them almost 30 seconds adrift of the women's only world record. We were hoping we'd see an attack on that, but the pace just hasn't picked up in this second stage. Could we see another phenomenal last 4 miles? Yahalu was great last year. I'm going to work together through these final 4 miles. I'm sure they're going to push each other to some fast times. Another look back at the elite men's race. Great pacemaking here from Daniel Mateko of Kenya. He's checking his watch. As we've said before, they're paid to go halfway, and then there is a little incentive every 5K after that. These men will love to be part of such a major race as a pacemaker, and they've got those mini targets down the road if they can just make it another 5K. Tamarit Tola, the world champion, is another athlete that's had a nice quiet race. He's just sitting there at the side of the group.
Well. The battle of the Brits, and for the first time in the race, we see Emile Caresse take the lead in the British-only race. Comes here on his debut. He's never ran a marathon before, but he has been in great form. Set a half-marathon PB, set a British record over 10 miles. Now trains, well, sometimes trains out in Kenya with his new coach, Renato Canova, the great Italian coach who works with a lot of the Kenyan athletes. And the word was that Emile was in great shape. All the signs were there. He went through halfway, Hannah, in 63:45-ish, so 2:07:30 pace. But having listened to a podcast with Emile recently, he was talking up, going through faster in the second half, so having a positive race experience. He didn't want to die off, and it looks to me like he's coming through strong.
That Chase Packer around about 2:07 pace, Emile Caresse and Sir Mo Farah. There will be some other kind of bodies in the pack, this lead pack, and those men, I'm sure, that have been spewed out the back of this ferocious front group. They're on around about 2:03 pace exactly. Kelvin Kiptum just checking his watch there. Tamarit Tola, as I mentioned, the world champion, he's tucked in there fine. Jeffrey Kamomra, he's looking comfortable. I did say I'm an athlete. That's an athlete I'm excited to watch through this race. He could be back to his very, very best. At fourth at the World Cross Country, that's nothing to be sniffed at all, especially off the back of a fifth at the World Championships.
Jeffrey Kamara looking really good, isn't he? Looking really good. Kiptum still looking strong. Kipruto hiding away in there in the middle. Tola on the other side. 2:03:01 at the last checkpoint through that 5K. As you said, Hannah, bang on 2:03 pace with a fast finish. That could sneak into 2:02. That's really good running, isn't it?
So Daniel Mateko there, is that him saying, no, I think he said, I'm good. I can take you further. He is in the way of the athlete that ran the fastest ever closing half for a marathon, Kelvin Kiptum. And if Daniel Mateko thinks he's got more in the tank, that is absolutely fantastic news for this race. And because I do feel the second pacemaker steps to the side, that's just going to unleash Kelvin Kiptum. Surely he knows that's his superpower, that he knows it's his strength. He won't want to leave it too late. Lewis, you said sort of you thought maybe a minute difference between a Valencia course and a London. You know, it's a bit wet today. So, you know, if Kelvin Kiptum's a 2:01:53 athlete in Valencia, you know, he's right on that sort of form he's showing here today. And so he could be very, very dangerous in these closing stages.
And isn't that a fantastic shot from the heli shot? Overlooking the sights of London, Tower Bridge there in the background. The boat's going. I always thought that'd be a good way to watch the marathon, wouldn't it? Go down the boat, nice bit of classic English cup of tea, maybe a bit of afternoon tea on there, bit of champagne to celebrate for our winners, who will have champagne on ice at the finish. Can you believe it? Hassan has made her way back. Hannah England sat next to me celebrating, like I told you so, Lewis. What were you thinking, saying that she might step off? I just can't believe how well she looks now compared to what we've seen earlier, around about the hour mark. So it was about an hour from now. She was stood on the side of the road, literally coming to a stop, stretching off her hips, stretching off her glute, in a pigeon stretch position, really struggling with her bottles, really struggling with muscles. And now, if anything, she looks one of the best, if not the best in this group. You can see the others just starting to struggle at the back, and Hassan is here, and they will know that her presence is there, because let's be honest, she is the fastest in this field when it comes to an outright sprint finish. No one will be able to live with her if she turns those afterburners on. So somebody's going to have to start to think, how can we get rid of Sifan Hassan again?
when every 100 meters that gets clipped off here for Sifan Hassan, she's in her territory. She's trying to toe the line here with marathon specialists. This group really is down to the women that have made their name in the marathon. We've lost the likes of Ayana Dibaba. Dibaba's still the 1500 meter world record holder. Who wouldn't have loved to have seen a sprint finish between Dibaba and Hassan? But this is Sifan Hassan territory. But a speed kick versus a strength kick is a very different picture. It's Sifan Hassan. She has upped her mileage into this preparation, but she's maintained her track sessions because she wants to do that 5,000, 10,000 campaign in the summer on the track. So 5:33 there for the last mile. That's not too fast, and I think that's what's allowed Sifan Hassan back into the picture here.
That's exactly it, Hannah. I just noticed that come up on the bottom of our shot, that 5:33 mile, which is a significant drop in pace, and that's allowed Hassan to get back on. And is that a bit of a mistake from our lead group? Will that give Hassan that little bit of belief she needs? Now, I'm going to ask you, as a former 1500 meter world medalist, had you ever gone to the marathon and found yourself in this position? You've caught them up. What's going through your racing brain now as a 1500 meter runner turned to marathon? Is it sit and kick, or is it actually I'm going to go and have a bit of a go at the front?
It's sit. I think Sifan Hassan, I loved her pre-event interviews here in London. She said I absolutely loved it. Am I going to defeat the marathon, or is the marathon going to defeat me? And it's been a roller coaster here today for Sifan Hassan. And she's been very respectful of this distance, incredibly respectful of the race. And I do think she might be counting in her lucky stars that she's got back in here. And she's a very, very canny racer. We've seen her time and time again win major track races. And I think she will know her strengths. She will have studied her strengths. And I think she's just got to sit and wait. And it's really down to, and Chepchirchir has been on the front here the whole race, trying to push the pace. Yahali's had a tiny bit of a sniff. And this time back in October, Yalam Yahalu really, really pushed on. And I kind of feel like if that was in her repertoire today, she'd be doing it already. She wouldn't have let the pace slip here. Magatu's looked totally untroubled. She's there. And suddenly Sheila Chipkaruri is back in the picture. She was grimacing. So I think we're going to see an explosion of pace here. And it's just who can respond to that, who's positioned well. The margins of error here are kinder than in a track race. You're not going to, I think you're not going to miss a break. You're either going to be able to respond to it or not. But all these women will be waiting for it's almost who loses their patience first as well, isn't it?
Yeah, Chepchirchir just starting to struggle on the back of that, but it is a game of chess. It is a game of patience. Who's going to bide their time? Who's going to go for it? But also that thought process around knowing your competitors. Who's in that group? What am I going to have to do to win this race? Because people are going to sit there and know that Hassan has that lightning speed. Like you say, Hannah, that might not be as prominent over the marathon. That might be a little bit of more of a strength kick as we describe it. For those of you at home that are thinking, what are we talking about there? What we mean is you can run the kick out of the legs a little bit over these longer distances. It comes down to strength, not necessarily speed. However, Hassan will be able to tap into those anaerobic reserves right at the end and maybe just get a little bit.
So you can see the rain is coming down here in Birmingham and in London, and Kelvin Kipton has piled on the pressure here. Now, we've got a few screens up here in front of us. Kelvin Kipton missed his drink at the last drink station. He went to go for it, didn't quite connect with the bottle, and then he almost kicked on. It was almost like there was a frustration. It certainly wasn't an intentional miss, but he's been looking over his shoulder now for the last 2 or 3 minutes. This is very similar to what we saw in Valencia. What I loved in Valencia at this point is we saw Kelvin Kipton take off his watch and hurl it into the crowd. I've got no idea whether that's the same watch he's managed to get back. And after a performance like that in Valencia, he could probably afford a new one. But I think it's what I love about elite marathon running. For so many people that attempt the marathon, it's just about surviving, isn't it? And it's eking out the perfect pace of what you can do. It's not racing. But on the elite side, what we see is real, pure racing. And Kelvin Kipton has laid his cards out here, has tried to see if anybody else can respond. And at the moment, it has blown apart this men's field.
absolutely blown apart. I mean, that gap is opening as well. He keeps looking round almost to see, am I getting the gap that I want from the effort that I'm putting in? Because I'm putting in a surge, and that should then reflect a big gap. And he's kind of getting that confirmation by looking over his shoulder. I caught a cheeky glimpse of Scott Overall on the side of the course there, works for London Marathon. He'll have been impressed by that move from Kipton, but one of our greatest British marathon runners, certainly the greatest British debut. It's a cracking debut Scott had, but Kiptum is now well and truly clear, and he has the road to himself, as he did in Valencia. The only thing that I would say here, Hannah, is this is an early move. It is a really early move to come away from Canary Wharf. He's still checking his watch. In Valencia, that move he made with the watch, as much as it might have been for the cameras and whatever, it was almost like a confidence of, I know I've got this. Whereas we've just seen him there look at his watch, almost a double check. Hang on, what's that pace? You know, I want to make sure. And there's a little bit of a grimace on the face. And I don't think that's a confident look over the shoulder. Probably wrong, given my call on Hassan earlier. But I think that's a little bit of a check to say, I'm hoping to open up the gap, and I want that gap to be significant, but I'm not so sure that this is a bit of a move too soon. We will soon find out.
I'm loving the brave commitment from Jeffrey Kamara of Kenya. He's the only athlete. He's lifted his pace as well. He's so experienced. He's not gone with Kipton. Perhaps felt that was too much, but the Kenyan behind in second place at the moment, white and red strip there, has given himself every chance of picking up the pieces if Kelvin Kiptum has got this wrong. Now, we were talking before we came on air, Lewis, about the course, and you almost said Canary Wharf, it is sheltered, it's noisy, you get excited, and then you get into this quiet stretch here and you think, that's it, I'm nearly on the embankment, but you're not. You know, they're just around I think they've gone past 30 kilometres now, but you did say it's very, very tempting at this stage in the London Marathon to think you've nearly got the job done, and to make a move like this. And yeah, this is exactly the territory that you said you think people can sometimes get it wrong.
Yeah, we talked about it, and we spoke about that downhill section out of Canary Wharf and coming out of the noise and getting a little bit excited, and then almost kind of putting all your cards out there. And is it just that little bit too early? I mean, we're looking at, what, another 30 minutes worth of running here. Now, the cadence looks good, but for me, the worrying look is how much he keeps checking over his shoulder. If it was me, I'd take one look and then I'd be gone, but I'm not a marathon runner. I've not been in this situation. Certainly, I'm not comparing myself to Kelvin Kiptum, but I just think that gap now isn't growing. Kamara, and he's still looking behind. He still looks over, and I just think, just look forward, just go forward. But we know he's a bit of a character. He's a bit quirky. He's certainly super, super quick. That debut was the fastest ever debut in Valencia. He absolutely tore it apart in the second half there, and he's tearing the field apart here, coming out of Canary Wharf. However, will he be able to sustain that pace?
Back with the women's lead group, Nagatu and Hassan side by side. Hassan surely just chilling out, just gathering herself for a sprint. They're alongside the embankment here in London. Sheila Chepkarui perhaps still struggling slightly at the back of this group. Olympic champion Peres Jepchirchir has been on the front pushing for so long. Sifan Hassan, a true track running star, running right up the back there of Peres Jepchirchir. She knows how to stalk an athlete in front of her. But for me, Sifan Hassan looks absolutely fine. She looks better than she's looked at any stage in this race. I haven't quite caught a glimpse of Yalam Zerfia Halu. Can only assume she's still in this group. Nagatu, there she is. Yalam Zerfia Halu and Peres Jepchirchir, they have been going side by side, but there's been no massive moves here. What do we think we've got left? Around about 8 minutes in this women's race. I do think Sheila Chepkarui has been battling her way onto the back of this group time and time again. Surely she can't get on the back for 4th or 5th time. You might be down to 4 women in this elite women's field.
Yeah, this is that section where they make that swing round onto the embankment before they start seeing landmarks such as Big Ben in front of them. Not so sure if they've been under that underpass yet near Blackfriars. They may have just done that. I'm not sure if we missed that, but that's a little bit of a tough section when they go down that bank and then up the other side and out of that little tunnel, that little bridge. Now just starting to pick their own racing line. That's interesting. Is this a drink, do you think? Yeah, it is. So Jepchirchir just thinking, I need that drink as well. Oh, now
Hassan.
Hassan, there's the inexperience. That's the inexperience that we spoke about. She's never been in this situation before. She darts across the road, realizing the experience of Jepchirchir just making her way across smoothly towards that drink station, and look at the time that's been lost. What I would say, Hannah, is she's made it back up really quickly. So that says one thing to me. She's clearly still feeling good.
2K to go, and there's a woman who traditionally doesn't like taking drinks in a race, and she just darted across the road. And now she's off. Yahalu saying, no, mate, we've got 2K left to go in a marathon. What are you playing at? And Yahalu and Magatu really choosing just to totally ignore that drink station. Jepchirchir and Hassan, a quick hit of some sugar or something like that could make a change at this point. Perhaps Safan Hassan has been threatened by her coaching team. You are going to take your drinks no matter what happens, and she's lucky they weren't in a larger group. I mean, he wouldn't be in these latter stages in the race. It's interesting to hear Safan Hassan has been training out in Ethiopia in preparation for this race, and her and her coach Tim Newbury, this is their first marathon they prepared for, and they actually spent some time with Mo Farah and Bashir Abdi and Gary Loth, asking them, what do we need to be doing here? And she said one of the big things is she'd go out for runs with the guys, and it's slower. If you're going to up your mileage, you've got to slow down your runs. And I think perhaps also you've got to just bite the bullet and take those drinks.
If she wins today, Hannah, which would be fascinating if she does, it would almost be that the highlights reel of her winning would be almost how not to run a marathon, which is absolutely incredible. How not to run your first marathon, yet she could potentially win London Marathon. This is what makes it fascinating. She looked to me like she was out doing an ultra, just passing a drink to a friend. Would you like a drink? With 2K left into the London Marathon. And I think, personally, looking at that now, she looks like she's got a lot left in the tank. And I think out of all of those women there, she's the one to watch now. She really, really is. We've talked about that lightning speed she has from the track. Can she then transition that speed to the marathon? We're about to find out.
See Westminster and Big Ben at the end of this embankment straight for the women. They will then take a right-hand turn towards St James's Park, Birdcage Walk, Buckingham Palace and the Mall, and that will be it. It is really into the closing stages here. It's a little bit over a mile or so to go for these women. Lewis, we spoke about it when we had the wheelchair races. We used to run an amazing event here put on by London Marathon. It still goes on now, called the Westminster Mile. We don't run it anymore, not as fast as we used to. It's not the most straightforward of finishes. You have got to gauge your effort. These women will have had a look at the finish. The likes of Yahalu is familiar with it. She won this race last year. But what would you be thinking at this stage, approaching that technical finish?
It is a technical finish. There's a lot of turns, and they're quite sharp turns as well. And if I was somebody like Hassan, who's used to running on the track and has that experience, I'd be using that knowledge now, what I call like your racing brain, and also sussing up and seizing the kind of opportunity. Take your opportunity when it comes. As we move back to Kiptum.
Kelvin Kiptum through Rainbow Roads, around about the 21-mile mark, moving through Limehouse here in London, the capital of the UK. And listen to that noise. That's the LGBTQIA+ community giving Kelvin Kiptum all of their energy. And Kelvin Kiptum, he's stopped looking behind. He's stopped looking at that watch. Jeffrey Kamomora of Kenya trying to make it a 1-2 here for Kenya. We thought Amos Kipruto, the defending champion, would be the big threat. Jeffrey Kamomora is giving himself every shot of getting back onto Kelvin Kiptum if anything goes wrong for the man that's pushing off the front.
I tell you what is interesting, Hannah, is how many of these guys could Emile Caresse potentially get close to? As this, field at the front starts to splinter, and as they slow down, they've still got a good 20, 25 minutes worth of running in their legs. Emile Caresse is moving his way forward. He's on around 2.7 pace, and they are moving back. So that is going to be an interesting story to develop as well.
The women are just about making their way onto Birdcage Walk. We have got 4 women definitely in contention. As Sheila Chepkarui of Kenya, a late entrant into this race. She was denied the visa required to race Boston last week, and she's really doing everything she can to get onto these top 4. But I think the pace is going to lift even more, and we could see 4 women fighting it out for 3 positions. But Yahalu, Alemo Magurtu and Peres Jepchirchir, they've got to go, and they've got to get this pace going, because Sifan Hassan has got speed for days. Alema Magurtu is the first woman to break. She has upped their pace. They're probably around about 800 meters to go now. Magurtu with an injection of pace, and last year's champion, the youngest ever winner of the London Marathon, Yalamzurf Yahalu, is not going to make it a fairy tale defense. She is the first casualty of this group, but Alema Magurtu, that seemed like a spurt of speed. Now she's just backed off ever so slightly. Jep Kirui closed that gap, and surely, apologies, Jep Chirchir is the athlete going into the lead now, and surely the Kenyan Olympic champion, she has got to go now. It is now or never.
Absolutely now or never. Hassan just almost bided her time, let it happen, and that is the experience from the track, that tactical genius that she is on the track. And we can see 600 meters to go. She's never been here in a marathon, though. That is the big point here. She's so used to being in the mix on the track time and time again. It's going to be a burn up over the last 600 meters. Jep Chirchir, Olympic champion over the marathon. She knows how to get across that finish line first. Magurtu was first to go. Hashi went a little bit too soon. Yahalu is out of it. It's between these three. My money is on Hassan.
You cannot bet against the Olympic champion over 5,000 and 10,000, but maybe you can when she's up against the Olympic marathon champion, Peres Jepchirchir, in the middle of that group. Alema Magurtu, that injection of pace has reduced this group down to 3 and has surely got the Ethiopian on the podium. But can she have another burst of speed here? Sifan Hassan grimaces for the first time. Here is the first of the tight right-hand turns. They've all navigated it absolutely fine. If they look over to the left-hand side, they will see Buckingham Palace, but they might not have any energy or any focus on anything except the bodies around them. Alema Magurtu, again, pushing to the front. She was third here last time round. She won Seville last year, and she is having a bid to win the London Marathon. She's been running marathons for 6 years. Alema Magurtu under 2:20 for the first time last year, but surely the charge is going to come from Sifan Hassan. They're going to pass the 200-meter mark to go, and that is very comfortable territory for the Dutch woman, Sifan Hassan. She's cut off there a bit by Jepchirchir. Alema Magurtu tries to kick again, but here goes Sifan Hassan, the track specialist, on her marathon debut. We knew she had speed to turn on when she was ready. What a day for Sifan Hassan. Drama around about an hour in with a hip niggle, and yet she's clawed her way back into this group. She looks as surprised as the rest of us. Sifan Hassan on her marathon debut takes the title on the streets of London. 2:18:33, shock all over her face. What a performance and what a day. Could this be the start of a marathon career for Sifan Hassan? She was intimidated but curious, and she has come away with the win in a high quality field. She has beaten some of the best women marathoners in modern times, and she looks absolutely delighted.
Wow. I'm speechless. I think she looked as surprised as I did when she was running down that mile, because she went through a roller coaster of a ride to get herself to that finish line. But it is inspiration for anyone watching at home. Never, ever, ever give up in a marathon. Sifan Hassan, take a bow, because that was outstanding. Magurtu hung on for second, I believe. And I think Jep Chirchir, the Olympic champion, in third. Last year's winner, Yahalu, I think may have been back in fifth, actually, in the end. But what a race. I mean, the women's wheelchair was something. We've had the women's elite race to back that up. We may have runaway winners in both the men's wheelchair and the men's elite race. But that was something very, very special, which I'm sure, Hannah, we will remember for a very long time.
I have loved the whole last 2 weeks of this build-up for Sifan Hassan, and if anyone's not seen the press conference clips, head over to London Marathon Instagram. It's hilarious. It's been going viral over the last 24 hours. You know how everyone feels when they're approaching their first marathon. She was so normal, so human about it, and to come away with a win was great. Judith Correa coming through here, I think for 6th place. She was 4th last year. Backed that up really well, but you can see tired legs for the Kenyan athlete here. The knee lift has gone. She's willing that finish line closer with every step.
Yeah, and there is De Barbara as well coming across the line, I believe.
I think Ayana, which means De
Oh, it is
Barbara must
Ayana,
have had a really
Wow.
some trouble there in the closing stages, unless we've missed her coming across.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that is Ayana. Similar strips, of course. All eyes on Samantha Harrison. She went through at around about 2:25 pace at the last checkpoint that I seen, and that is for the British title. Remember, we've seen 1, 2, 3 in the Women's London Marathon. We're keeping an eye out for Samantha Harrison and Alice Wright. The last time I checked in on Alice Wright, she was around 2:27. So that's going to be the domestic dust-up that we're looking for as we see the rest of our top 10 come through the line.
Tadu Tashomi coming through really well here. She was 4th in Valencia, not quite matching that performance here. She struggled early on. We saw her dropping off that group. She's kept the momentum and the speed really well there. Tadu Tashomi of Ethiopia coming across the line.
I'm sat here with a huge smile. So are you, Hannah. We're just like brimming because of what we've just witnessed. It was absolutely incredible.
She said, what? she is in as much disbelief as the rest of us.
Nice aerial shot there. And there is Kelvin Kiptum. He's in familiar territory. Not in London, of course. I mean in first place. His first marathon in Valencia. He ran away from the field in the second half. He's made a habit of doing that. He's here in London doing the exact same thing. There's Tower Bridge in the distance. That's about the halfway point for our masses. But Kelvin Kiptum is very much on his way down towards that finish line. Interesting story with Kiptum, Hannah, was he's took up a bit of sponsorship with a Chinese company, and apparently they're here in London, but Nike were wanting to wear his shoes and his kit, and obviously the other company have something to say about that. He seems to be in all Nike today, but it'd be interesting to see where he goes from here, because he's going to become a big player in the men's marathon game. You know, Kipchoge, is he on his way out? Every time we say that, he comes back and surprises us. But Kelvin Kiptum is going to be 2 wins from 2 starts.
It's very, very impressive from Kelvin Kiptum. You can see her just again, these pictures of Safan Hassan. Absolute disbelief. She's still shaking her head.
Yeah, we're seeing these pictures of Hassan and the rest of the women who are coming through towards the finish. Also on our other screens that we can see is Emil Caress going very well in the men's race. And we're still making up the top 10 here. Yaremchuk coming round the final bend. She's got a national record of 2:23.44, so that's from Valencia, and we'll keep an eye on that as she comes across the line. She's not going to be too far away, I don't think. She's had a great run here. Still finishing strong as well. She looks really good in these closing stages. She maybe has her eyes on that clock. In fact, she does have her eyes on that clock because she's checking the watch. So that's a 2:23.44, which is a national record, and that is the national record, sorry, which is what she's got her sights set on. That was set in 2012, so some 11 years ago, and it's just going to be outside 2:24.01. It is heartbreak for Yaremchuk, but it also is a very, very impressive marathon time.
And is that an Olympic qualifier mark? And I think we could have seen some of the other top athletes not that far behind Yaremchuk. This is the American Susanna Sullivan. She's got a personal best of 2:25, and she's obliterated that. She's taken around about 40 seconds off her personal best there. Susanna Sullivan has had a brilliant campaign, and here comes our first British athlete, Samantha Harrison, grimacing into the drizzle here in London, but it has been a super day for the young British athlete. She's had a phenomenal last few years, fairly new to running, spent the summer working on her track speed and was very rewarded fantastically well with a 6th at the Commonwealth Games and at the European Championships over 10,000. But she's back to the roads, back to her comfort zone. It's a 55-second personal best in Berlin at the half marathon. 4th all-time on the British ranking, 67.17. That was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, she's flying, isn't she, Hannah, into the finish. She's going well still. I did her an injustice earlier. I said 69 minutes when I should have said 67 for Sam. Charnwood AC athlete as well, local to the Leicestershire area, maybe just losing her footing there a little bit as she comes towards the finish. Let's keep an eye on the clock because, Hannah, you're looking at the all-time British rankings there for the marathon. Where's this going to stand her?
I think Samantha Harrison is going to push herself certainly well into the top 10 all-time British marathon. She is rallying so hard here, Samantha Harrison. She's familiar with this marathon distance. She knows how to push herself, but this is uncharted territory for the Charnwood AC athlete. Just a shade under 26 minutes. That will put her 6th on the all-time ranking list, just ahead of Natasha Cockram, who ran a brilliant time in Valencia a few months ago. What a run from Samantha Harrison, surely securing qualification for the Budapest World Championships. But she will be the British champion here today at the London Marathon. The race within the race, and that title goes to Samantha Harrison.
Yeah, well done, Sam, and well done to Vince as well, close friend of mine who coaches Sam. 2:25.58, we think, and that's inside Natasha Cockram's 2:26.14, which was set in Valencia. Natasha was pre-selected, wasn't she, for those World Championships, so that might just secure her a spot on that plane to Budapest in the summer. Here he is, Kelvin Kiptum. He's looking good under that pass that we talked about. I think that's Blackfriars Bridge, where you come out the other side and you really do then come onto embankment, and he looks focused. He looks in the zone. He's got 1 hour 52 on the clock, around about 10 minutes worth of running left. He's absolutely obliterated the field in the second half. They were all together for a long time, particularly over Tower Bridge, but he was the one keen. He was the one saying to the pacemakers, come on, let's move this on. And when he got to Canary Wharf, which is a distant memory, he turned the afterburners on and he has not looked back, although he did look back quite a lot, didn't he, really? But he has been head down once he got that gap, and it's all eyes on the finish now.
I wonder if Kelvin Kiptum was just checking, you know, is anyone coming with me? Because if you've got someone in your coattails and you're being a pacemaker for them, you know, does that change what you do? Do you step aside and try and work together? Because you don't want to just do all the work for someone and pull them along with you. And I think once Kelvin Kiptum realised he was going to have no more company here on the streets of London, he stopped looking back. He hasn't looked as nervous. And there's not quite the same sort of shock and disbelief that he had on his face this point in Valencia. That was his debut marathon, and he pushed all the way to the 3rd fastest time ever, 2:01.53. He's not going to be that fast today, but it's very different, isn't it, to go, we've seen it with Hassan, to go into a marathon in a debut and wonder what's going to happen and have that relief and that elation. It's been a very different preparation for Kelvin Kiptum. In the last few months since Valencia, like, right, I am a world-class marathon runner, and to have to reproduce that here in London, I'm sure it would have been a bit more pressure for Kiptum than maybe he had in Valencia.
Yeah, he still looks good. He still looks strong. Just an update on the Battle of the Brits. Emile Caresse is sat at around 2:07.20 pace. And Mo Farah is still on course out there around about 2:08 pace. So Mo is still having a good run out there. He went off maybe a little bit too hard. We did say that early. He was itching to get that pace moving, whereas we felt like he should have sat back just that little bit. But Emile is rallying, as is Kelvin Kiptum, who is absolutely flying home down the embankment. The spectators are starting to make some noise. That is just going to get busier and busier and busier as our elite men come through, and then the championship entries, and then the masses. Like I say, the battle is for 1, 2, 3 in this men's race, and there is also a battle for the 1, 2, 3 British spot. So we'll try and keep you posted. But if you are following along at home or around the world, then download the London Marathon app. Keep up to date with all those splits. You get them every 5 kilometres, and it's a really good way of staying in touch with everybody who's out on the roads, because we are following the men's leader, Kelvin Kiptum, the Valencia Marathon winner, the fastest debut of all time. It looks for sure like he's going to take the London Marathon title this year. He goes over to the final drink stop. We say the final drink stop. We think this one's the final drink stop. Sifan Hassan, the one that she darted over to. If you were with us watching the women's race, she made a dart over to that side of the road before going on to win the women's marathon. And it's now Kelvin Kiptum's turn to take his final drink.
I do think, you know what, 1:55 through 40 kilometres, that's a great move there from Kelvin Kiptum. He ran a very fast 10-kilometre split from 30 to 40, 28:05 in Valencia. I don't think it's been quite as fast today. The course different here in London, but the move has been just as devastating. Kelvin Kiptum has blown this field apart. Last time we saw Geoffrey Kamumura of Kenya was in second. We haven't seen a figure down the back of the track there for a while. We do think that Kelvin Kiptum has lifted his pace. The course record of Eliud Kipchoge stands at 2 hours 2:37. And if the computer's right, Kelvin Kiptum is operating faster than that.
Yeah, I've just had a look at that pace graph. Really interesting. It's like a U shape. It goes down, and then all of a sudden it just comes back up, and you can quite clearly see from that pace graph, there's a big injection of pace at that point that we've seen out of Canary Wharf, and that has put him back on schedule for around 2:02. Now, if he is still increasing the pace, Hannah, that means he is going to go inside of 2:02. So we might not just have a course record on our hands here. We may be on for something really, really special. So again, we're saying Valencia is potentially a slower course in London. We may see him go faster than he did in Valencia. I don't think we're going to see a world record. He's got
1 mile to go, 1:56.40. That's not going to be. That's not going to be far off. And Kelvin Kiptum here, he is building momentum. He'll have the crowds to support him. He's got these bikes around him. It's not the same as having a competitor, but he's running free. He's running relaxed. Kelvin Kiptum is just coming underneath Big Ben. And the next landmark after that is Birdcage Walk. It is final stages here for Kelvin Kiptum of Kenya. This is a phenomenal run. He's a very, very talented young man, and this could be a brilliant performance here in London.
I've got butterflies in my stomach. They've gone through 25 miles. Big Ben is ticking along towards 12 o'clock. And that means when Big Ben strikes at midday, Kelvin Kiptum has been on the road for exactly 2 hours. And we're looking at a time of inside 2:02 here. Kelvin Kiptum did that on his debut in Valencia. We weren't sure if it was quick enough to go that quick in the second half at London here, but he was clearly feeling it, and he has put the afterburners on, and he has gone through with 1 mile to go. And I think he's going to go inside 2:02 and absolutely smash the course record here in London. But the question is, how fast can Kelvin Kiptum go, and do we potentially have a men's world record on our hands?
55.13, that was a split through 40 kilometres. That is significantly faster than Eliud Kipchoge's split when he set the course record here in 2019. That course record surely will go. Eliud Kipchoge very gamely came to London today to start this race. He had a tricky time in Boston on Monday, coming back in 6th place, and could he be about to lose his course record?
Geoffrey Kamumura just starting to struggle a little bit, but he's well underway as well. London Eye on the opposite side of the road. So he's now onto embankment, and hopefully the crowds can start to pick him up as he makes his way down towards Big Ben. He is chasing Kelvin Kiptum, but that gap is huge, absolutely huge. And just to put things into perspective, the fastest marathon we've ever had in an official race is Eliud Kipchoge's 2:01.9, set in Berlin in 2022. Then Kenenisa Bekele is the second fastest man behind Kipchoge in 2:01.41. The man you see on your screens, Kelvin Kiptum, he is the third fastest marathon runner of all time, having ran 2:01.53 in Valencia. But the question is, Hannah, where will he be at the end of play today? Will he still be 3? Will he be number 2? Will he be number 1?
Kelvin Kiptum has built momentum fantastically well in this second half. He was very patient. He egged on the pacemakers. But this man is simply phenomenal in the latter stages of a marathon. He has chipped away at those times, at those splits. He's underneath Kipchoge's course record split at 40k. He was just outside the world record split. But it seems as though Kelvin Kiptum is gaining momentum with every step. What has he got left in these closing few stages? He's passed 600 meters to go. If he looks up, he's going to see Buckingham Palace, one of the best landmarks here on the streets of London. He's been past all the sights and sounds that London has to offer. The crowds have roared him down the streets. Kelvin Kiptum is converting a fantastic debut in Valencia, the world's best ever debut, 2:01.53, into a London Marathon victory. But where will he finish on the all-time standings? Around about 2 hours and 30 seconds as he swings round with 385 yards to go. This is a phenomenal run from Kelvin Kiptum. Surely he's just going to miss the world record. 2:01.09 is too big a ask for Kelvin Kiptum at this stage. That's the bike getting waved aside, not Kelvin Kiptum, as this time he comes around the corner. He's going to be close to 200 meters to go. He's going to surely just miss Eliud Kipchoge's world record. That is the mark of Kenenisa Bekele, 2:01.41, the second fastest time of all time. That will go. Kelvin Kiptum, what a man. This is his second ever marathon. The Kenyan athlete was great over half marathon. He's run 58 minutes over that distance a few times, but that run in Valencia was fantastic. And Kelvin Kiptum is backing that up and some here on the streets of London. He's grimacing, he's gritting his teeth, he's giving everything to get towards this finish line. 2:01.26 or so. That is the second fastest marathon time ever. And he's obliterated Eliud Kipchoge's course record by over a minute. Kelvin Kiptum, what a superstar. Surely we are looking at a man that could challenge that world record of Eliud Kipchoge's, and he has given everything. Look at that. What a way to run a marathon.
Wow. Wow. It wasn't on at halfway. By the time we got to Canary Wharf, it was starting to look a little bit more special. We questioned whether it was too soon. He was obviously feeling good. And that sprint finish at the end, was there a little bit more in the tank? Well, we'll find out the next time this man lines up over a marathon. But look at those celebrations. Kelvin Kiptum, you are the second fastest man in history.
That is some run. London Marathon always has world-class fields. It always has world-class pacemaking. It's not the fastest course out there. So that time on this course has got to be one of the all-time great marathon performances.
Yeah, we had that question. You put that question to me, Hannah, about what's the difference between that and Valencia? And I guess the other thing that we didn't discuss at the time is it's horses for courses as well, isn't it? Some people actually like a little bit of undulation on a course. Some people like the pancake flat long stretches, but some people benefit from that little bit of undulation, that break up, the twisting turns. It takes the mind off things. Paula obviously ran well here. That was the fastest marathon time for a long, long time. But Kelvin Kiptum, wow, he has just really blown this field apart. We see second in the men's race coming around the corner. Jeffrey Kamawar coming to finish second in the men's marathon. And this is still going to be a pretty quick time as well.
This is a great run from Jeffrey Kamawar. 5 World Marathon major podiums from 2012 to 2017, including a win in New York. But then we haven't really seen him since that period. He's had a torrid time with injuries and disruptions. He said he felt like he was back in his 2017, 18, 19 shape. And the Kenyan was not wrong. His resurgence started in Eugene last summer with a 5th place at the World Championships. He backed that up with a really nice 4th place at the World Cross Country Championships in Australia. I'm sure he would have loved to get on the podium and pick up a medal at that prestigious race, but he knew that that was an indication he was back to his very best. Jeffrey Kamawar of Kenya is going to take 2nd place here in the London Marathon. It's a tired 2nd place. It's a brave decision at around about 30k to also up his pace. Jeffrey Kamawar is gonna just about make it over the line, and that's a personal best by some minute or so. Mark of 2:05. It's from a few years ago. Jeffrey Kamawar, all hugs between the two Kenyan athletes. There's always that rivalry between Kenya and Ethiopia as well, and they'll be delighted with that one too.
3rd place coming down the mile. That's Tamarat Tola from Ethiopia. So Ethiopia are going to get themselves onto the podium. 2:03.39, his personal best. So he's going to be just outside that, but 2 PBs for the top 2 and a 2:04.58 for Tola to wind off your top 3 here in London. Now all eyes go on to Emil Carres, because I've just checked the tracker. He has come through 24.85 miles. He is into the last section, 2:07:30, around about there, Hannah, are expecting. I mean, that'll be some debut from Emil. And I think the last or the highest placed British finisher for a while was Mo Farah, 5th. Is that the highest place we've had for some time?
Here is Leo Gebrselassie. He was 2nd last year. It's going to have to settle for 4th this year round. Very consistent, always in the 2:04, 2:05 range. Gebrselassie with another good performance in a major marathon. Still getting himself underneath 2:06. And just limping across the line there. So that is 4th place in the elite men's race. Gebrselassie right on his limit there. You can see the 3 podium finishers as well, hands on knees. They are absolutely exhausted, as is this man. Sefu Tora just limping it in here. This is the damage that Kelvin Kipton did to this field. There was a big group of them till 30 kilometres, and then it just got blown apart. Sefu Tora.
He's a major marathon winner as well, isn't he, Hannah? And this is what he's done to major marathon winners like Tura. I mean, everybody is struggling across the line now, but that pace was absolutely fantastic that he put out, and it has done the damage. It didn't seem too fast through halfway. It seemed about right, didn't it? The pace was set up perfectly for him to do it, but these guys have really struggled off the back of it. Coming in at 2:06, we can see on some of our shots, and hopefully they'll come through to you very soon, that Emil Caress, number 33, based up in Leeds, trains a little bit with Phil Sesamon, moved coach recently to Renato Canova, has been under the tutelage of the great Alan Story, who's helped many of our marathon runners over the past years, and he talks a lot about learning and being a student of the support. What I love about Emil Caress is most of his runs are done with a Casio watch, and we could learn a lot from that, running to field, getting out there and exploring. He looks great. This is his debut, the first time he has gone over the marathon, and he will go again in Valencia later this year.
Absolutely phenomenal run from Emil Caress. This preparation started with that silver medal at the European Cross Country Championships in Italy behind Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Then he went on to a European 10-mile record in March, and he has looked stronger with every race that's gone on. This could be the fastest, I think he's just going to miss it, the fastest British debut is Steve Jones in 84, 2:08:05. Emil Caress is going to be agonisingly close to that. Mo's mark in his debut was 2:08:21. So Emil Caress is right around the mark of Steve Jones. What a run from Emil Caress. We have seen some great debuts today. Sifan Hassan taking the women's race on her first attempt, and that for Emil Caress to take the British title. He's top European over the line as well. That is a major run for Emil Caress. Incredibly exciting.
A major run in a major marathon, and that signifies Emil Caress's intentions of where he intends to go. And what a great sight. I can see Brett Robinson, Mo Farah, Sir Mo Farah, followed by Phil Sesamon. Phil's had some great success here over the last couple of years. He's at a top 10 placing. He captured the nation's hearts with his story when he was first Brit back. He has his dog named Kipchoge. The doctor from Leeds follows the great man himself into the mile. What a fantastic story. One great marathon runner handing over the baton to the future of British marathon. And what a servant Sir Mo Farah has been. The last time we will see him in a major marathon, and fitting, Hannah, that we see him on the streets of London.
Mo Farah passes for the last time through that arch, 385 yards to go in front of Buckingham Palace. Phil Sesamon will not give up here. Anyone follows British domestic running, Phil Sesamon actually beat Jake Whiteman, our 1500 metre world champion, over 3,000 metres indoors in January. Sesamon knows how to sprint, but Mo Farah, the medals he's got, the passion this man has got.
Here we go.
This is a battle royale for second and third in the British Championships here at the London Marathon. Both these men still inside the top 10. Brett Robinson has managed to separate these men himself from these men. He's not going to better his Australian record, but it is going to be a great performance from Brett Robinson. There goes Phil Sesamon. You have always got to fear the sprint finish from the man from Leeds, the junior doctor. takes another second place at the British Championship, matching his mark from last year. He's going to be just outside 2:10, but what a race for Mo Farah. His build-up has been questionable. His team have said he's in good shape, but there's been some performances that made us really worry what we would see from Mo Farah today, but that was classy. He went for it, he committed in the first half, he gave himself every shot at running really fast and running with the best men, and he managed it for a really very long time, and that, for me, is a very nice performance from Mo Farah.
And what a brilliant way to go out in a sprint finish with, you know, arguably one of our best British marathon runners right now. Phil Sessamon gets himself second place at London, has a brilliant record here in London. And for me, it was just lovely to see, you know, Phil battling with Mo, and Mo still putting it all out there, wanting to sprint to that line. The body wouldn't respond. In the past, it would have responded. But Phil, the younger, the fresher athlete, and, you know, they'll have a hug later, and I'm sure Phil will talk about that for the rest of his life. But this man has given us so many great memories, particularly here in London. We think back to 2012, Super Saturday, where he really ignited the nation. And one of his good friends, and one of my very, very good friends, Chris Tomo Thompson, in COVID, he set the world alight, the running world alight in Kew Gardens. He had little Theo. Gemma had just given birth in the same week of the marathon when he booked his spot for the Olympics, and Tomo crosses the line in 2:11:49. Well done, Tomo. The grit, the determination. 42 now, I believe, and he might have even ticked over to 43. I'm losing count. My first training camp with Tomo, he was 25 in Portugal. We celebrated his 25th birthday together on that training trip, and I can't believe 17, 18 years later, he's still going. And you may need Dr. John Rogers' support. I know you just pointed him out.
If you wanted to see anyone at the end of an effort like that, it would be Dr. John Rogers. Worked very closely with some of the best British athletes, and he will know Tomo incredibly well. But a note on Emil Caressa. I haven't seen the official time yet, but 2:08:10 is the Olympic qualifying time, and he was certainly under that. And it could be sort of an equal debut record for Britain. That 2:08:05 was the mark set by Steve Jones all the way back in '84. Emil Caressa, great run.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it, Hannah? Because he said he doesn't want to go to the World Marathon Champs this year. He's focusing on other things, but he is going to Valencia, and he will have his eyes on that Olympics next year with that qualification time. Mo and Tomo, good friends all their career, and they're finishing up. And see Lara coming in there. That's Luke Caldwell, actually, another British athlete. But that is our first runner from the masses, wearing 2:0:26. What a run that is. That is a brilliant, brilliant run from the mass start. That's going to be around about 2:12, 2:13, 2:13:20 is our first runner from the masses. Luke Caldwell backing up his good marathon debut with a 2:13:27, and a bit of a celebration across the line. I can see Lara coming in there, the German Groschel finishing off as well. Well done, Luke Caldwell. A brilliant, brilliant run.
So have a look at today's results. The first person across the line was Marcel Hug in a new course record with his third consecutive title here at the TCS London Marathon. Jetsplatz of the Netherlands was a great second place, and Tomoki Suzuki of Japan picking up third. Good results all the way down. Daniel Romanchuk couldn't make it another podium. David Weir completing his 24th London Marathon. Here are the women's results from the wheelchair race. Madison de Rosario hasn't been able to make this start line for a few years through disruptions, but she was back with a bang here in 2023. Took the sprint finish just 1 second her margin of victory over Manuela Schär, and last year's winner, Catherine de Brunner, having to settle for third. The men's race was one for the ages. Kelvin Kipton blew the field apart in the second half, with the second fastest marathon time ever, 2:01:25. Jeffrey Kamomra of Kenya came through for second, a return to form for the man. And third place was last year's world champion, Tamarit Tola of Ethiopia, 2:04:59. Backed up by his teammates, Gebrselassie and Tura. Emil Caressa took the British title here today, 2:08:07. That is the second fastest debut ever by a British athlete. Safan Hassan was the champion today in the women's race in what was her debut marathon, and it was certainly eventful, stopping to stretch her leg around about the hour mark and then hauled herself back to the lead group. And by the time she was there, no one could live with her sprint finish. Magertu of Ethiopia in second, and Pedes Jepchirchir of Kenya is having to settle for third.
Well, what a day, Hannah. The second fastest marathon for men. A debut to remember for Safan Hassan, and 2 wheelchair races. One really competitive amongst the women, and Marcel Hug bringing it home for the men and getting after it twice in a week, once in Boston and finishing off in style here in London. It's been an absolute pleasure as we see the masses come over Tower Bridge. It's all about them now and their stories, but it's been one to remember, particularly at the front end of the races, with Kelvin Kiptum becoming the second fastest man to ever run the men's marathon.
And I wonder how aware of that these athletes will be as they make their way around the streets of London. They might be tuning into stuff online, trying to figure out what happened, or they could just be focusing on their efforts today. We have got a record number of mass participation athletes today. We think there'll be around about 45, 46,000 finishers here at the London Marathon. I was reading, in fact, there are 225 birthdays being celebrated by today's runners. This London Marathon has been going since 1981, and the event has raised more than $1 billion for charity over the years. You can see athletes, I presume Ian there is in fancy dress. I think fairy wings and a tiara isn't the optimum outfit for a marathon, but he looks like he's working it very, very well.
I noticed a tooth on there as well running across as we see it. And you try and spot all the great causes that are out there, people raising money and awareness for some fantastic causes, some club vest and lots of fancy dress out there on course. They've all got their own story to tell. They've all got their own marathon to run, 26.2 miles with all the pictures in sight. They're about halfway on their journey, but there's going to be a lot to come into this afternoon's London Marathon.
So Lewis, you've got a number of athletes that you're working with out there on the streets of London. Most importantly, your wife Gemma is out there. You were querying whether you'd be able to track her whilst working here with me on the world feed. How's she getting on?
She's doing all right. She's on around 2:45, 2:46 pace, so she's not too bad. She's ran London once before, 2:49, so she should go quicker. And we're coming up towards 20 miles for her. James, who I coach, is around the 2:20 mark from the masses, so he's going to have a good run. And lots of other people out there as well. And I just want to give a quick shout out because I can see somebody pushing and supporting an athlete there to Joe and Alice, who we do coach. Joe will be pushing Alice round in around 4.5 hours today. And they're running for Make-A-Wish. So best of luck to Joe and Alice, who'll be on course this afternoon.
There are so many heartwarming stories here on the streets of London. The official charity this year of the TCS London Marathon is the Great Ormond Street Hospital Children's Charity. They've got 600 runners out there on the roads at the moment. They've raised in excess of £1 million already. That's before the event even started, and I'm sure those donations will keep piling in as these athletes pile across the finish line. This really is an iconic day for us here in Britain. Our major capital shut down, and all these athletes running down the streets. It's a real bucket list for anybody that is into running, whether that's in Britain or across the world. The ballot actually for the London Marathon did open yesterday for next year's event. So if you've enjoyed watching the sights and the sounds here of London, you can go and get yourself signed up for the ballot, and maybe you could be joining these athletes next year.
Isn't it a great sight? You know, you see the pacers going through, the 350 pacer there, and people, like I say, taking on their own marathon journey. Lots of inspirational stories out there. I've seen a Gosforth Harriers vest up from the northeast, the green and white of Gosforth. I've seen a Teenage Cancer Trust vest. A lot of my club mates from home running for Teenage Cancer Trust, and then Mind. And I know the likes of Kevin Sinfield are out there. King Kev raising awareness for MND. And Chris Walker, who I coach, is also raising awareness and money for MND out there today. So best of luck to him as we see lots and lots of people. There's actually Dave Orton, one of the athletes who I do support. That's a good spot, isn't it? And told him to conserve energy, and he's shouting at the crowds as he goes across Tower Bridge. But that says to me he's in a good place. Ben Spencer as well there from Barrow Runners. You can see the Barrow Runners vest, so good luck to you, Ben. Lots and lots, and that looks like your husband Luke, but he's sat at home on the couch, I believe, Hannah. But
he definitely is, yes. But the London Marathon, they have pacemakers in this field as well, really helping people go for their marks. So this is a wonderful day for mass participation running. But one thing Lewis and I did want to pay credit to, that the London Marathon, as well as putting on this event, they put so much support into the grassroots sports in Britain. We had the mini marathon yesterday that saw a record number of children racing around the streets, getting the experience to race in the city capital in a major event. London Marathon put that on every year. There's actually a wheelchair event there. That was David Weir, one of our Paralympic stars, very first experience of athletics, and it put that on the mark, on the radar for him. But outside of that, London Marathon put a lot of money into supporting our endurance runners through their events, when they offer a great support package to any Brits that take part. But outside of that, they support a lot of our top athletes in their training practices, in their training camps. And to see athletes like Samantha Harrison and Emile Caress come through today to take those British titles in fantastic times, they really are products of the work that London Marathon puts into our country.
absolutely, and we benefited from that, Hannah, like you say, the training camps that you go on and the support that they give you as an athlete. It is absolutely paramount to your success, and it's great to see that next generation coming through and benefiting from that. And as you say, the mini marathon, my first mini marathon, ironically, was the year Paula set the world record here in London, which was unbelievable. And you will get inspired by that as an athlete. I was inspired by that. You know, I ran down the embankment to watch it, to feel the energy. And if you are a young athlete here watching at home, why not come down to London? Even if you're not running the mini marathon, get yourself down, taking that energy, taking that inspiration from the masses, take it from the elites, take it from the wheelchairs, take it from everybody who's on course, because it really will set you up.
So overhead shots here, and coverage will go on long into today in the UK following those mass participation runners. But we were here to look at those 4 elite races, and they were incredibly entertaining. We had 4 defending champions and actually only 1 repeater in Marcel Hug. So that shows the depth and the quality of the races that we had today. We got underway with the 2 wheelchair races. Katharine de Brunner of Switzerland was the victor in the women's race last time round. She lined up against some stiff competition. Susanna Scaroni won the Boston Marathon on Monday. It was also Madison de Rosario and Manuela Shah alongside her. 10 minutes after the wheelchair race, we got underway with the elite women's field. This was the deepest ever women's field. 6 athletes had gone underneath 2 hours 18. We lost the world record holder, Bridget Kosgei, very early on. It was clear that the hamstring injury she picked up a couple of weeks ago was going to stop Bridget Kosgei having any attempt here on the streets of London. That was just in the opening half a mile or so. The rest of the main competitors settled into their pace. Marcel Hug was a tiny bit cagey, perhaps, in the opening 10 kilometres. He set a course record to win Boston last week. Susanna Scaroni won Boston last week as well, but she had company here on the streets of London. Marcel Hug didn't have company for very long. The Swiss athlete pushed on after that opening 10 or 15 kilometres or so and was making his way around the course. Eliud Kipchoge, the world record holder in the men's marathon, got the race underway. That gave us all 5 of the fastest all-time male runners. 4 of them down on the streets, 1 pressing that all-important buzzer for the elite men and the mass athletes behind. At this point, the women were already 35 minutes down the road, and it was starting to look like track specialist Safan Hassan was not at all comfortable in her marathon debut. Queries over how she would cope with the distance. Not Marcel Hugo, he is a veteran of the marathon, breaking his own course record to take a 3rd consecutive win in the men's wheelchair races. Time to celebrate. And smiles all round for the Swiss athlete. Sifan Hassan, with those early struggles, had dropped significantly off the lead pack at this moment. It was being led by Olympic champion Jep Chachir. Jets Platz of the Netherlands took a great second place. Daniel Romanchuk just off the podium, down in 4th. British superstar David Weir having to settle for 5th on his 24th London Marathon appearance. Talented group of elite men made their way around the streets. Madison de Rosario powered her way to a sprint finish with a look of shock across her face, just ahead of Manuela Schär. Last year's champion Catherine de Brunner settling for 3rd. It was a very well-timed sprint for Madison de Rosario of Australia. A woman that's been unable to make the start line for the last few years, but back with a bang here in 2023. Lewis Moses, my co-commentator, and myself could barely believe our eyes. Sifan Hassan made her way back onto the elite women's lead pack, and just as the excitement was kicking off on the women's race, the same happened over in the men. Kelvin Kiptum was starting to launch the phenomenal finish that he knows how to cope with. This is the final 2 kilometers in the women's race. Sifan Hassan not content to have the drama further on. She wanted a bit of drama there, but here was the closing stages. We're not going to leave the best sprint finish to Madison de Rosario in the women's wheelchair race. That will have to go to Sifan Hassan on her debut over the marathon distance. It was a tumultuous race, a roller coaster for the Dutch woman, but she ended up on a high, celebrating the whole way down the home straight. Absolutely delighted. She could hardly believe it. 2:18:33, the winning mark for Sifan Hassan. And could this be the start of a road career for the track specialist? Double gold in Tokyo over 5,000 and 10,000, and now a London Marathon title. She said she'd use this race to decide what she might target in Paris, and maybe it will be a new challenge of a marathon. Kelvin Kiptum blew apart the men's field and ended up with the 2nd fastest time ever in the male marathon. It was a phenomenal run, another devastating second half from the Kenyan athlete, and you'd think in other conditions could he run a world record. A great return to form for Jeffrey Kamoma of Kenya. Hugs from the 2 Kenyan teammates. Tamarit Tola, the world champion from Oregon, spoiling the Kenyan party by getting Ethiopia on the podium as well. Another good performance from the Ethiopian, but today was all about Kelvin Kiptum. Dominance, rewriting that all-time record list and putting himself all the way up there in 2nd place. It's been a great day. Lewis, it's been great to have you alongside me with your marathon knowledge from your coaching career that you've launched after your running career. What for you today were your favourite moments?
My favourite moments were how competitive both the women's races were, the wheelchair race and the women's elite, and then the kind of runaway victories, but especially Kelvin Kiptum. He's a character, he really is. I will never, ever forget what happened with Sifan Hassan taking that win. It's the most memorable marathon victory I've ever seen. But they are just a number of the highlights to take away with us from what has been an unforgettable day in the capital.
So you look at those 2 results there for Sifan Hassan. Let's take that first, her debut. What a relief. You know, she's put a lot of time and energy into this. If you were Sifan Hassan, what would you do from here? What would be your plan of attack into the next few major championships?
Rest, recover, and review and reflect on what has been. There's still a lot of learnings in there from her. She can go a lot quicker than that based on what we've seen. But have a look at, is this the event you want to do long term? You know, do you want to go back to the track? That will only help. But there's a lot of reflection to take away from today's marathon.
No, there certainly isn't. First off, stretch that hip because it didn't look very happy. But what a day here on the streets of London. It was a wonderful 2023 edition of the TCS London Marathon. Wins for Marcel Hug and Madison de Rosario in the wheelchair races. A fantastic winning debut for Sifan Hassan in the women's. And Kelvin Kiptum took the men's title in the 2nd fastest time ever. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.